All right, we ready? Let's do it. So I've been told that we have to use mics.
Because it's being recorded?
Because we are being recorded.
We can just bring
So-
that there,
Bring what where?
over there in the circle, and then we'll just turn on the mics.
Well, yeah, but I think I have to stay here.
No, I think we can turn this on and then talk there.
Oh, okay.
Yes. You know? Yes? I think you do.
Will this work? Okay, this works. And then let's see, does a slide advancer work out here? Because if it does, then, okay, good. All right, cool.
Oh, this is great.
Yay.
Hi.
Is your back?
That's fine.
Is that your water?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so, oh, we have more people, yay, come in, come on in.
We got space right here.
Good job. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Whatever you like. Well, good afternoon. So for those of you who I have not had the pleasure to meet before, I'm Annahieta Kalantari. I'm currently the vice chair at Hershey, and I convinced these three to do this session with me today. So I'm going to hand them the mic because we're only allowed to use a mic, even though there are 8 of us in this room sitting at a table. Come on in.
Yes. Sorry. It's okay.
So we'll go to you. All right.
Hi, I'm Nicole Battaglioli. I am describing myself, I guess, nowadays as a bit of an academic dropout. I don't know. Which Jeanette Wolf was like, then why are you here? It's so hot outside. No, but I've worked with these guys for a long time in the space of wellness. I mainly do locums now, and I have like a private practice that I'm building up. But we've been working together in the space of physician wellness for a super long time.
Hashtag wellness unicorn. Ellie Alvarez. Oh yeah, so if you're not in the wellness group, that's okay, you're still welcome here. Okay,
You're welcome to stay.
yeah,
Or you can go to whatever you
yeah. Whatever you paid to sign up to do, go do that.
It's the one right next to this, so that it's room A. This is
Okay.
Yeah, enjoy the wilderness.
Come back.
Once you get bored with poison ivy, we'll welcome you back.
Ellie Alvarez, I'm the Director of Wellbeing. They can hear.
I was gonna say, can we put it down?
Yeah, I think I'll just like record.
Will it do that?
Yeah.
I don't think they're gonna
I don't
fire
think
us.
we
We're gonna get yelled at.
No, we're not.
We'll say it was a tech. Say it was a tech
SAEM's
issue.
never
I love
having
it.
that.
They said to use the mic. We are using the mic because they are on.
Okay.
Those are the rules.
And the boss in the back isn't here right now.
Yeah, hi Bob. Ellie Alvarez, I'm the Director of Wellbeing at Stanford. I'm the Chair of the Wellness Committee. Actually, I'll be the past chair as of tomorrow, so I'm excited about that. And within the university, I run the peer support program for institutions. So.
Arlene Chung, I am the Vice Chair of Academic Affairs at the University of Vermont, which I moved to fairly recently after spending about a decade in New York City. Yes, I'll talk to the microphone. And in addition to education, I've done a lot of sort of work in the physician well-being space, largely with these 3 fine folks over here too.
Well, we're a small group. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
I would like that.
I would love that.
I'll go first. I'm Lindsay McConaughey. I'm the APD at Guthrie, which is like a rural, small place in. You do?
I'm in Hershey.
Oh, then you would know.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, I don't think so. But I had no idea that I just picked whatever I thought was most needed in my program right now because I knew I like just got in. But I am kind of the unofficial wellness person in my residency and looking for some deliverables to help me do a better job at what I'm doing. And we need to work on building culture.
Yeah.
Because we're a newer program,
Yeah.
so that's kind of why I chose to come here.
We'll definitely cover
Good
that.
choice. We're going to cover them.
That's
Just
what
so
the
you
description
know,
says, so here I am.
Wellness and not the wilderness emergency medicine session.
Where's the wilderness? Not that I'm you guys, I actually was like, wow, they look all really attractive and beautiful. So that's why.
Right next door.
It's you're welcome to
Is
join
this the
here.
Awatuki room then?
Huh?
No.
It's the same.
No.
It's just
No, we're Levine.
Yes.
Yeah. We're A,
The
and then the other one is
Godspeed,
B.
everyone.
That's okay.
I will.
Yeah.
But, everyone's always attractive. I need to leave. So.
It's like-
So hi, I'm Jo Whitus. I am a clinical nurse specialist for IU Health Methodist Emergency Room, and I am one of the co-chairs of our Healthy Work Environment Committee.
That's the one, the healthy work environment.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, so that's what we do. And I'm here spying for an ENA they sent me. I know,
I
right?
love it.
So I'm taking back.
Yeah.
I'm Allie Dwight. I'm a rising fourth year at the University of Virginia, and I'm the volunteer side of the session, but I'm all about mindfulness and all those So, yes, excited.
My name is James Borchet. I work at Emory, Grady. I've had various hats there over the years. I've been in APD, looked after rotators, and been co-chair of the wellness committee, and that's what I do now. Most wellness committee with Ally, and I'm also the chair of a subcommittee.
Yeah.
Looking at
A big deal.
designing a physician wellbeing consult service for academic programs.
And we just had a pilot, the
We just
first
did our
one,
first
the
pilot,
very
yeah.
first. Yeah,
So
exciting.
it's fresh.
My name's Alan Forrester, I'm a physician in Australia. So coach of regional base hospital, which would be considered base hospital here. So 300 K tertiary. And I was the director there for about 15 years, and now, what else is doing that? And our group's getting a bit bigger, and it's busy, so I thought it'd be useful to get some information to take back home to our physician. We had sort of wellness, I think it was first sort of came around 2013, 14. I think there was an idea that was an annual college conference. And I thought it would be a great idea. The person I thought was going to point to that quit medicine for about 2 years and we did yoga and bathing. Unfortunately, that was something.
They are doing quite
Actually, very well.
Would have been the perfect person. Anyway, we had a wellness program going. It got disrupted a lot by COVID. Nurses and doctors. So that's it.
Wellness or wilderness?
Oh, definitely Emily is
This is-
here. That's okay, that's okay. Perfect timing.
Yeah. So that's
Awesome.
I just find it fascinating that the Australian is here for wellness and not the wilderness next door. So thank you for.
Well, that's everything that keeps you. He already knows how to take care of it. Did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm so sorry I'm late, you guys. I
No,
really
no, no.
apologize.
You're
It's such a
exactly-
boutique group, and here I am, like, causing trouble. I'm Emily Hirsch.
Wellness or wilderness?
Cool. Pull up a chair.
Pull up a
Oh, I
chair.
love it. We're growing. Yay.
Our numbers are growing. I love it.
That's great.
Yeah.
That is wellness.
That is.
I'm the chair of the Cord Wellbeing Committee, and I showed up late to a meeting because I needed to eat breakfast. So I get it.
So I'm Emily Hirsch. I'm emergency medicine physician in Greenville, South Carolina, and I'm the director of our faculty wellbeing group. So it's nice seeing all of you guys. I tend to do most of my work on fatigue, sustainability over years of practice in emergency medicine. So yeah.
Oh, I know. There's like a train track behind here, so it'll be very loud later on. I was here this morning.
I'm Jennifer Fry. I'm a research operations director at Ohio State. I sit on our institutional college of medicine, wellness, well-being, and belonging committee.
Yeah.
And so just here to learn a little bit more.
With Dr. Sauerwein.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Sauerwein.
absolutely. So she leads the residency program, and I'm on the staff side.
Oh, cool.
And so I'm starting to
That's
think
such
about
a great
things
idea.
from a staff perspective.
Yeah.
So like our research staff and other
That's the
clinical
right
staff.
notes.
Yeah, well, we're going to need there's going to be reflecting and writing and all kinds of jazz. So welcome, everybody. We initially got an email that said we were going to have 4 people, so I'm happy that we have more than 4. Now the attendees outnumber the speakers. So it's always a good thing. So we here today are going to talk about wellness tools that drive change. We don't have any financial disclosures, and we have. I'm going to go through kind of all the objectives for the whole session, but we've broken this up into kind of 3 sections. So we're going to talk about some updated data on the human stress response, because I bet you there's a lot of stuff you guys don't know. And then we're going to talk about either how we ourselves make these changes or how we teach trainees to make these changes. We're going to take some time to work through some short and long-term goals, and that's going to help us kind of reprioritize commitments. And then we're going to reflect on systems drivers of burnout at home institutions, and then how we kind of apply change principles to them. We pick Cotter's, but we're going to, for the objectives, we're going to go through a couple things to kind of help with that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to reframe stress. So when I say stress is, you think of what? Fill in the blank. Stress is, first word that pops in your head. Frustration. Normal. Anxiety.
Can I get more than one?
Yeah.
Just when
Unwelcome.
the demands of the situation, like distributed perceived resources, there's a mismatch.
Wellness or wilderness?
Wellness.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
That's when you celebrate every single one that comes in, even if you want to go to wilderness.
Also, can I just give mad props to the doctor who just walked into the room and shut down Senator Murphy and his Educate Act at LAC? So, here, for everyone else who doesn't have the honor of knowing you, we've already done introductions. Yeah.
Ugo Ezanquo. I'm the chief of the emergency department at Mount Sinai, Queens in New York, and I'm also the diversity, equity, and inclusion chair, committee chair for ACEP. And I do a lot of different other things, but yeah.
Shut it down. All right, so we're just talking about the first part of what we're going through is.
You guys thought we were kidding.
I get it now.
So when we talk about stress is often, you are correct. It is kind of what happens to your body when the demands outstretch whatever resources you have. And that is one of the definitions of it. But when I say stress is, and I have people fill in the blank, it is, what is that? It could be a good thing, but oftentimes the responses are what everyone said here. I had when they said it was only going to be 4 people, I took the poll everywhere word cloud down. but in groups of 35, 40 people, when I do this exercise, things that I get up there are divorce, an exam, death, illness, all very negative things. So before we get into today, in this whole session, I want you to think of a time in your life that you have deemed very stressful, whatever that time is. And I'm going to give all of you a couple minutes to kind of work through this. And what I'm going to ask you is just kind of go through and identify what was that event? Like you go back and you think about it and you're like, oh, wow, that was really, really stressful. What was that event for you? And if you want pen and paper, it's right here because we're going to be doing some scribbling. And I would ask you to do this because what I'm doing with all of you guys is actually one of the things that we're talking about. And when you write and reflect, it will actually work. Hello, my friend. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Well, we already did it all.
Hi, I'm Doug.
So, Dr. Char, what we're doing right now is we're going back and we're thinking of an event in our lives that was particularly stressful, and we're identifying what that event was. And so if you have a pen and paper to scribble, that's great. If you want to put something in your smartphone, here we can split this up, and here's some paper I can give you. You're good? Okay. So we'll just take a couple minutes. Oh, here we go. Dr. Battaglioli saves the day with some more pads and pens.
Oh, yes, I do have my phone, so who else needs a? Thank you. Yeah, we got pens too. Use pens.
Is this a 10 out of 10 stress, or we just focus on the 5 out of 10?
Anything, any event that you went through that you're like, oh my God, that was really stressful. That was just a lot. Give it a couple more minutes because I still see some heads down and writing going on. Okay, so hold on to that because throughout this first session, we're going to go back in time and reflect on, this event that we went through. And I'm not going to make you share anything. This is private. This is for you. If you want to share, obviously you can, but you don't have to. So let's talk about some updated data on the human stress response and how we're going to teach our trainees. So we know a lot about stress, right? We went through COVID. We experienced things as physicians. And there was this event where I believe his name is Damar Hamlin. He was, what was he, with like either the Giants or the Bills? I don't remember. I knew it was a red and blue team, and both in New York. And so he had a cardiac arrest, on TV. And it was aired nationally. People saw him getting chest compressions, and all these people started saying things like Aaron Rodgers is like, oh, I'm not really okay with that. That really bothered me. And like all these people are posting things on social media, and they're just all jacked up about it. And then one of our own, Lexi Mannix, she was an APD in Jacksonville. Is she still APD? Yeah, I didn't know if she was PD now. She tweeted this, and it went viral. Right? So when you said that stress is normal, it is. It's normal. It's completely unavoidable, and it's everywhere that we are. I mean, it's part of life. So I was kind of talking to a dear friend of mine a while ago and just kind of rattling off all these things that were going on in my life about how I'm so stressed out, I can't sleep. And I'm one of the people that when I feel high stress, I kind of go into this like tachycardia, insomnia, no appetite. Like I'm just full sympathetic kind of response when it comes to stress. And I shut down, I like lose weight and all these things, happen. And I was talking to her about it and she was like, you know what, you have to read this book. And the book is called The Upside of Stress by Kelly McGonigal. Now, Kelly McGonigal is a psychologist, and this was her PhD thesis. This book that she ended up writing was the result of her thesis. And she's also a protege of Aaliyah Crum, who we'll get into some of her work as well, but she does a lot of stuff with mindset interventions. And this book was very profound in the things that it taught me about stress and what I hope as an educator and just a human living am able to apply these principles to my own life and to our trainees and to our colleagues and to other people that we are interacting with in the emergency department. And so some of the things that we're going to talk about this morning are the things from this book. So if you miss anything, you can get this book. I don't own any kind of like royalties if you buy it. So
We'll let you download it for audiobooks.
what is that?
The Libby app will let you download it
Oh.
for audiobooks.
Oh, wonderful. So, that stress is bad. Where did that come from? So it actually came from animal studies that started in the 1920s to 1930s. So there was a Hungarian endocrinologist, his name was Hans Salje. And Hans Salje was trying to find new female reproductive hormones. And so he was taking bovine placenta and ovary and pureeing it up and shooting it into rats. And he was noticing that, the rats suddenly, yeah, right? Go science. He realized that the rats were kind of becoming less intelligent. They weren't able to complete mazes like they were before. They weren't eating as much. And then some of them just outright died. And he did these necropsies of them and found that, the weight of their brain was down a few ounces compared to normal healthy rats. They had gastric ulcers, and there were all these issues with the rats. And he was like, I'm not sure if that is the ovary milkshake I shot into them or if it's what I'm doing. So he did the same thing and used saline in another arm. And he found the same exact thing happen to rats. Fast forward through a few iterations, and we went from Hans Salje kind of torturing rats a little bit to stress. That is where stress was born. The first terminology of it was from Hans Salje. Around the same time, you had Walter Cannon, and he was also doing experiments about catecholamine responses. And so what he did was he put a bunch of dogs and cats in a room to kill each other, and he would measure what their vital signs do, what are their hormone levels. I mean, he did all kinds of other things too, asphyxiating these animals until they almost died, but then would bring them back. And again, it was like animal, Fight Club, and was measuring that. And from that we learned, guess what response? We learned fight or flight, because these animals would either run away or they would try and kill each other just to survive. But we've learned a lot about that. It's not the 1920s and not the 1930s anymore. And the problem is those initial studies that were done, every single study that was done from then until really 1980 were all done from this frame of these are all the terrible things that stress is going to do to you. I mean, if you look it up, it's stress causes diabetes, it causes heart disease, it causes everything. Every study was oh, it's stress and it's really, really bad. But then we started learning there's a lot more to human stress response than, animals trying to kill each other, right? Fight or flight is the most basic stress response that you need for species survival. But we do more than that as humans. And so one of them is called the tend and befriend response. And this was first described by Shelley Taylor. And this was a response that they saw it was usually in communities that had some kind of tragedy. And they would see these villages. And whenever these tragedies would happen, these villages would come together and they would talk about what's going on, and they would share feelings, and they were able to try and problem solve. This is an oxytocin-mediated response. It's literally the exact opposite of the whole HPA axis cortisol response that most of us have learned is stress. So this is one response. Another one is something called the challenge response. And the challenge response is a DHEA-mediated response. And this is a response that actually promotes long-term learning, and it also stimulates increased blood flow to the brain. So there are these just a whole separate set of physiologic responses that happen under a DHEA-mediated stress response. So we kind of have those studies. Well, then other people were like, you know what? Let's go back and look at some of these other studies with this new frame of reference and find out what we can learn. So that initial Framingham study that came out, I think it was 1978. What they said in it, I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but it was basically if you're a type A person, you're going to have heart attacks and die. You know, I mean, that is like this super, super simple one-liner. But what they did was they went back and they looked at the data and they're like, actually, no. It was the people who said they have high levels of stress and they said they think stress is harmful. Those were the people that had the increased incidence of adverse cardiac events. It wasn't just every type A person. It was the high stress is going to kill me, and then it kind of did for some of them. Keller et al. Did a really great study where they followed people for 8 years. And they found that those same individuals, the same people who are like, I have really high stress and the stress is going to kill me, they had an increased mortality rate and died at a younger age than some of the other people who were like, no, I mean, it's just normal. Stress is what it is. And, you know, you can use it, you cannot use it. And then we know from a lot of sports studies that athletes can be trained how to use these levels of stress that they're experiencing for higher performance. That's also been applied in different academic settings, like in university-based studies as well. So there's a lot of different data out there that now supports stress is not this like, oh, it's gonna kill you and it's so bad. What I find most interesting are the mindset intervention studies that were done by Alia Crum. So Alia Crum is a psychologist who actually studied under Carol Dweck. So if anybody is familiar with the book Mindsets that Carol Dweck authored, Alia Crum was her protege. And what Crum did was, it was 2008, and for anybody who can remember 2008, I remember it very clearly because I just bought a house. And the house was insanely expensive. And then like 2 months after I closed, I got a letter from the bank that was like, thanks for this outrageous loan that you just took out. Oh, by the way, your house is not worth what you paid for it anymore. Sorry. And that was because it was during that financial collapse, right? With the whole like too big to fail, if anybody watched that. So there were a whole bunch of businesses in Wall Street that were now going to lay off a ton of people. Crum and her colleagues went into one of these businesses. They didn't disclose which one. And of the entire group, people knew, I think that 30% of them were going to be laid off, but they didn't know who. They did a stress mindset intervention with them. They took that entire group, divided them up into 3. The first was a group that learned kind of the stuff that we're talking about right now, how like stress is enhancing, the things that stress can do to benefit you, why it's good for your life and why you need it. There was another group where stress is debilitating, and then there was a control group. And they found that after they did these interventions, the people who were in the stress is enhancing group had lower levels of perceived stress, had totally changed their mindsets about stress, and then had increased job satisfaction, even though there was a chance they were going to be laid off. She did the same thing in an academic setting where it was a group of students who were being primed for a job interview. And it was a mock job interview, but they did the same thing. They divided them up, and they found that those who were in the stresses enhancing group actually had higher levels of DHEA during the mock interview than the other 2 groups who had higher levels of cortisol. And so, like, what does this all mean? Like, why are we talking about this, and why am I throwing all these studies at you? How does this apply to what we do? Well, you know, once upon a time, I had bad burnout, and it took me a lot to kind of figure out what was going on physiologically with me, like what's the narrative, what's everything that I'm going through with stress. And through that, we've kind of come up with ways where we can make some changes to what we're doing. The first thing is embodied learning, okay? So embodied learning is a form, it's adult learning theory. And it's basically, the best example I can get is, you know, for those who are practicing physicians or even not, you've had some kind of illness. You've experienced that illness in your body, you know that illness. You absolutely know that illness. I can smell a gastric ulcer from a mile away after having one. And that is a part of embodied learning. It is what your body physiologically experiences, and that becoming a part of your brain and your learning process. If you think about stress, we have embodied learning. We have a way that we respond. So go back to the event that you wrote down in the very beginning and tell me, what was your physiologic response? And I'll give you a hint. Mine is I get this feeling, this just very heavy feeling right here in my chest, and then this like pit right in my suprasternal notch, and then it kind of like moves around my neck into like my jaw right here. That is what my physiologic response to stress is. Take a second to kind of go back to that event that you experienced, and what was it? How has your body learned to show you stress? Do you know what you do acutely? What happens acutely?
I get a rash on my chest. It sometimes goes up to my neck. Doesn't help that I'm so fair-skinned, so it's very obvious. But
Can anybody else? Anybody else? What?
My neck tightens on the left side more than the right.
I get eye twitching.
Oh, I hate that.
I think I have a couple of different ones depending on what the stress is. But I sometimes get a really severe tightening in my throat. And that may or may not be with like a breathless kind of sensation. I sometimes have like a breathlessness that's maybe separate from that. But usually it's a lot of early morning awakening, mind racing.
Yeah. Yeah, so when I was starting this whole journey, it took me a minute to figure out what this was that was happening to me. And at the time, I hired this yoga instructor from the YMCA. Her name was, she's not dead, her name is Nanette. And Nanette's amazing. And one of the things that Nanette told me was, that's your alarm. When you feel that in your body, that is your alarm that you're going there. You're going to this place. It's your red flag. And one of the things she told me to like fix it was, she said, take your arms, put them way up above your head like this, and then take a deep breath, and then just go. And so in the beginning, I'm walking around the ED like, and of course I look like a lunatic. But that, whatever it is that you're feeling in your body, that's your alarm. That's your alarm that you're there. And the reason you need to know that alarm is because this is the next thing you need to do. In the very beginning, we talked about one of the things that is kind of the definition of stress is whenever you are in a situation where the demands outweigh the resources. But a lot of times they don't. A lot of times the resources are there. We're just too in it to see them. So when you feel that kind of red flag issue in your body, it's time to look for the resources. Where are they? What do you need? Who is there? What can help you? And that is also where some of these stress responses come from. When you have the ability to find more resources to exceed the demand, you are more likely to go down a DHEA-mediated challenge response, not the cortisol response. So you can actually control, and this has been proven, you can actually control which stress response you choose based on your ability to search for resources. It's part of the biopsychosocial model. We are always interacting with our environments constantly. And in that interaction, we are weighing the resources versus the demands. And when we are trained to find the resources, then our bodies choose a challenge response, DHEA mediated, not cortisol. So my next ask is, go back to that situation that you wrote down. What were your resources? Did you know them initially? Was it the lack of resources that kind of drove you to have that stressor? Just take a minute and kind of think about what resources you had.
Stress.
It's not stress, it's the change. I go from being fine to melting in seconds.
It was that thing.
Yeah. The next thing. So it is the deliberate stress response that you can choose. And this is how we teach our trainees. So we have that event that you experienced, right? And you had whatever your physiologic response was, and we have the demands of the resources, okay? When you are able to see your resources, you are going to choose a different response. When you use that red flag alarm and do attend and befriend, then you can help find resources. So for me, one of the biggest challenges of my life through my career was I was just in a work environment that was really, really great for everybody else, but not for me. It just wasn't a good environment for me. And there are people who started the same time I did who are still there and thriving and doing really, really well. And for me, that was the worst I've ever experienced anything in my entire life. That was what I was talking to my friend about. I wasn't eating, I couldn't sleep. I also was like completely apathetic. It was the first time in my life I'd ever actually experienced depression. And I had a lot of intrusive thoughts. And it wasn't until I started tapping into kind of this tend and befriend, because I thought I had no other options. I thought, like, this is where I am, I'm stuck. I'm an emergency medicine physician, you know, I'm gonna be employed by a hospital, this is where I live, there's not a lot of, you know, a whole lot of options in town and things like that. And so it was a really bad place. And so I started tending and befriending because I myself could not see the resources that were available. And it was amazing, this kind of little personal board of directors that I had was able to really help me get out of that. Our job as educators is to teach this to our learners, right? And it's gonna come in a variety of different ways. It might be a really salty consultant, right? It may have been a failed procedure. What we tend to do is we get in those situations that are negative and we immediately knee-jerk, because it is the oldest stress response that exists. Our body wants to go down that cortisol-mediated fight or flight response, when really we need to stop and pause and choose one of the other responses. Stress is linked, like negative occupational stress is linked with burnout. And this is one of the things that we actually can do to physiologically change the path of how our body is going to respond. And so I'm not going to belabor this because we have like other way more fun, not you need to, you know, be resilient stuff to get through. But what I would like you to do before we kind of complete this session is on your piece of paper, write, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently in that event? And maybe nothing, maybe something. Maybe your approach would be different, but just take like 5 minutes to go through and think about what would you do differently, knowing just this a little bit of data that I shared with all of you. All right, I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. I'm not going to make you share, but does anybody want to share?
Absolutely sure. So I came up with two initially. But I'm going to focus on the second one, which was about 4 months ago. Call 6:30 in the morning that my research lab was experiencing water leak. I had been in my new position about a week and a half at that point. And so from a resource standpoint, I was going through all the things and taking control and things like that. But what I learned later on was I didn't communicate my goals well to the team that was helping me respond. And so I think that was the feedback I got recently was, you looked intense, you looked stressed, I was afraid of you. And I went, that's never the way I want to. But it gave me the insight in how I responded to that stressful moment, taking control and using my resources. We got it all done, but taking the time to reflect with the staff was helpful.
How would you do it differently?
I would probably do a starter debriefing with everybody that was on site at the time and say, this is the situation, these are my goals, and this is what I need you to do. At this point, we'll check in as we meet each of these steps and probably lay it out a little bit more than I did at that time.
Awesome. Anyone else?
I don't necessarily know if I would do something differently. Some of you know I had my partner's mom died unexpectedly last year, and that was a big shock for me. And I just arrived in a different conference, leaving ASAP, and I had to quickly pivot, like switch flights and leave. And so as I was going through this, that's why I asked, like, is this a 10 out of 10 thing or a 5 out of 10 stress? And so, but I went there because I thought it was like something relevant that keeps on coming up for me lately. But in reflecting back, what I think I haven't done this exercise, and what came up was really the resources that I had. It was the first time that I've ever canceled on a presentation, and I'm fine. And the presentation was fine. And my fellow who's graduated, who's now going to be the chair of the wellness committee, she's fine. And it was the first time that I canceled a meeting for the wellness committee. And several of you reached out to me and sending me kind notes. And those are things that were very memorable. And so I don't know if I would necessarily have changed anything, but I think I would like to, what I got from it is that reminder that in as much as each of us are struggling in the different ups and downs in our lives, that it's good to be reminded that we're not alone. And so for me, that was really powerful.
Anyone else?
Similar situation. This past week has been terrible. My mom is super sick, so almost didn't come here. It's been going on for a while, but just, I mean, we all deal with like balancing like serious home stuff, serious family stuff, plus mom and like work and all that. You put it differently. I know I need to do a better job of using my resources. Like my husband, when he says, what can I do to help? I don't always do a good job, but the way you framed it here was very helpful. I just need to do a better job.
I think you're probably doing just a fine job. You needed help to just redirect the energy.
So I've had a couple of instances of death, and I think personally that's what has affected me the most. On January 1st, I woke up to, this was New Year's Day, and I received a phone call from my sister who was in the hospital with my brother, who's only 2 years older than me. I don't take myself to be incredibly old, but he was actually not having a good time, and he ended up actually passing away while I was on the phone call with my sister. And I was like, is anyone doing CPR? Emergency medicine kicks in, and clearly he was trying to talk her into the whole process. Anyway, he passed that way. But what was different this time, I think, was just allowing myself to grieve, because I've had death in the past before where I've just rebounded, gone to work, forget it, just sort of put that in the back of my mind. But this time I took the few days. They actually gave 3 days of where I work, but I took more than that. And I gave myself a chance to just really open up, just to be able to just let the tears flow, And it took a while, something I hadn't done before, and I think that made a big difference. I've also started doing all the mindfulness stuff with, box breathing and stretching and all that stuff. So that kind of helps me when I feel like that acute stress response. I feel like I got something I can do, a resource, as you point out, which is not something I had before. So this has all taken me a while to get to learn and embrace it. And I'm trying to, and the one thing I was hoping to learn from this, and I know we have a few more sessions, is how do you encourage your learners to embrace these resources, right? So we're talking about wellness at my camp. Their surveys come out, 60% emergency medicine is on top of the burnt out bracket. We all know that, but when you ask emergency medicine directly, they say, oh, I'm not burnt out, but they are. And I know that my faculty, I'm sure there's burnout going on. We throw resources at them, but it never seems that anyone embraces it. And I'm just saying, how do you teach that? You don't want to force anybody, but how do you make them understand the need to grab whatever resources? Okay.
So I have a thought, but does anybody else want to chime in on that?
No, I don't have an answer.
I think I share my own experience. I have told my staff, I have told our residents about using the employee assistance programs and things like that, and relayed that I use them to make it more acceptable. And we've had our program directors and other faculty do that as well. And I think it becomes more acceptable and takes away some of the stigma from that.
I don't really know that I have an answer for your question. I more have something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, which is how much I have not processed the COVID time and how much that seems to have like a physical response within me when I think about it now, which didn't for a long time. So it started coming up because I've lately had random people in the community kind of asking, well, what was it like to work then? And I mean, at the time, we just committed to it, right? We just went to work. We committed to do this job, and we were doing it willingly. But I know I was really, scared during that time. And it's interesting that now that it's all settled down, we're still back at work. We're still doing our thing. But if anyone else is like me, I still have some unprocessed emotions around all of that. And it's interesting because at the time I tried to use resources to get people on my, on our team, my faculty and our residents to sort of have opportunities to talk with one another about it. But I think we couldn't really at the time because we were just needing to put our heads down and commit to the job. And so when I think about what would I do differently, I'm not sure that I could have really done it differently at the time. But I think now about how can we allow space now for some of that to heal. Because I imagine that of our 250 people in our department, I'm probably not the only one. So, I've been doing some thinking about how do we make space now for us to be a resource for each other and give each other time and space for those who need it or want it. And not just keep moving on after the CPR, let's just keep doing our job. I feel like we've kind of kept doing our job after the COVID time. And it's been interesting to kind of see that I apparently have some stuff that lives within me. So anyway, I did not really mean to change the subject. You handed me the mic. I'm so sorry. Okay, please go back to the subject. Okay.
Thank you I am acknowledging. Thank you for sharing that. And I do think that there's a big difference that oftentimes we kind of just lump in together. What happened to me, it was a one-time thing. And so one stress, you move on or you deal with it, however we deal with it. But COVID is a great example of a chronic stress. What happens when it's day after day after day, and for a while we had no idea when it was gonna change to where it is now. And so without having a lot of even though we had a ton of resources, but we didn't have the information that we got was changing. The environment that we were dealing with were constantly also gonna shifting. And so I think for me, my experience with it is that it's a very different processing because it's the COVID and the many things that were happening before. And so when we talk about burnout, when we talk about resilience, so I'm a recovering APD, and when I was the second year class APD, there were things that I was not allowed to use for words. I was not allowed to use the word reframe because I tend to, so I would be reframing things because for me it was just a very natural thing to do. And now what I realize is, though whenever I reframed it, and I did the reframe and not the person dealing with it, that I'm dismissing what they're experiencing. So however that is now for people, I'm trying to just find space for them to kind of talk through it, because maybe your processing is going to be completely different from another person who went through the same chronic stress from COVID, and they're dealing with it from a different angle. But it's a very good question.
So my response is it's a culture change. And so you're going over there? It's a culture change. And so, the very first step in what if you read my bio, one of the very last parts of my bio is that I am dedicated to changing the culture of medicine from this kind of grin and bear it to one where there's just, you're allowed to actually be a human. And so part of that is modeling the behavior that you want to see and openly modeling it. The problem is that, even though we want to make the changes, we ourselves are still kind of not quite practicing what we preach. It just left my head, the other thing that I was going to say about that we do. Why? Did I say it wrong? No. Okay. Shoot, I'll remember it. It's part of it is remodeling, culture change. And then using real-time moments to allow people to use those resources. So an example, I had a resident who we had a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The way that we operate things in our emergency department is the trauma airways are us in the ED. So he was at the head of the bed and he had like brain matter. I mean, it was a lot for him. And I could see that like this was a lot for him. And I forced him to pause. I was like, listen, we're not, this emergency department, like I told him, I was like, I get paid way more than you because I can handle all of this. Like, I don't need you. Let me do what I need to do here. I will handle the ED. You need to go process this. And creating that space for people in real time and really making them do it is one of the ways that you can start to get them to more openly use the resources. Go ahead. Over there.
There we go. So some of you know, actually last year, I did have a massive heart attack. But the other stressful thing that happened, obviously I'm fine. I was completely fine before, and I was fine afterwards as well. But my husband retired from emergency medicine. And that was the existential crisis in our family last year. Because all of a sudden, like, where is the foundation? And so it was it was probably the most, we've been married for 25 years, together for 29 years, 2 kids, prior divorce, all kinds of challenges. That was absolutely the most challenging time we've had as a couple, as a family. And that was without any of the financial challenges that many people face. So, like challenges can come from all different directions, and it was certainly a long-term, moderately long-term stress. Not a one and done, that's for sure. So.
Deb, you have a comment? So it's interesting, I think. So one of the things I do in my spare time is I lead our med school's program for clinical support for providers. And the 3 things I've learned is, number 1, people often with great intent, like, I want to help this person through it. And the reality is I can't walk that path with them. I can walk alongside them, but I can't lead them down it, right? And they have to do it at their own speed. So some people are like, I'm fine, and they really are fine. And others are like a total mess, and they won't admit it. Right? The other thing is that what I found is many of us, and I'm a prime candidate, we're really over-invested in our careers, right? You say, what else do you do besides be an emergency doc? I'm like,
We spend a lot of time.
I know, but my response, my wife would tell you, is like, oh, I run to disasters and I lead national disaster response at the federal level. And she's like, and what else do you do? And I'm like, that's pretty much it. So my downtime is like, let's take off vacation time to go run to a disaster. And one of the things that has been pointed out by a number of the psychologists that I work with, trying to support the program, is that people who don't have other outside activities, other outside identities, where they're really overly invested in one particular identity, they have a harder time coming through adversity, because anything that doesn't go right really challenges that identity. And if you have you have 6 other things you do, then if one thing goes bad, you've got the other 5 to hang on to. But if you really only have one major focus in your life and something goes wrong with that, it's much harder to recover from it because you don't have another outlet and stuff. So my goal for the next year is like, I gotta find a hobby of some sort. And my wife says, you're not allowed to retire until you find a hobby.
In high performance teams, they call it the third thing. So we have our home life and we have our work life. And people who are able to weather a lot of these challenges, either at home or at work, is when they have a community, a third community. So if you have a hobby, whether it's scuba diving or underwater basket weaving, it's not just having a hobby, it's actually having a community around that hobby that tend to be helpful.
Dr. Battaglioli and I were looking at each other and laughing because we both literally just got done speaking at a conference where we did a team talk, and one of them was not allowing your professional identity define who you are as a person. So,
because then when your professional identity goes to the shitter, then you're kind of wondering like, now what?
yeah, exactly.
But I'm very curious though, and I know we're moving this, but I think we can slow it down a little bit in the sense that I'm very curious, in our environment, in our field, we tend to hide, talk about stress is enhancing. And so we don't see it as enhancing, we just see it as I don't want to show people that I'm stressed, and so I'm going to be this very calm and collected person, even though I'm struggling deep inside. How do we get past the facade of covering up the negative manifestations of stress so that we can actually go past that and look for the resources around us? Because I think you're right. We've heard different stories of stress, and each of us are affected by different types of stress, and yet we all walked in here smiling, joking, is this the wilderness conference or the wellness, all of those things are fine, and yet what we don't realize is the invisible trauma that we're all dealing with, they're there. And yet we don't often talk about it because stress is bad.
Well, it's even more than that, right? We're rewarded for being stoic.
Sure.
Right? Whether
Is
it's
it stoic though?
In the beginning or even now, we're rewarded. Everyone is so impressed that we can take a code, deal with it, move on. And so in some ways it's well, if I complain about it, then am I complaining that I got sort of some outside external reward, or
sure,
as I was held up as a model, and if I complain about it now, does that somehow take away from what I did?
Which is very resonating when we talk about residents calling out for a cough when we're throwing up in the bathroom and seeing the next patient.
Exactly.
And yet we need to figure out a way, that's not okay, and this is probably not so okay. Where is the middle ground here?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I feel like we're actually coming along better than we have. I think for the most part, gone are the days at most of the places that I've been to, gone are the days of the person who's like nonstop puking and walking around with an IV, seeing patients. Like, so, I mean, we are making progress, you know, but with any time, and if you look at any kind of, and we're going to talk about kind of like change dynamics and everything, but if you look at any of that stuff, we're turning a yacht here. It's not a speedboat. Right? And so I think we have to keep that in mind, that we're not going to go from the completely wrong direction and then do a 180 and all of a sudden be in the, it's little steps. So we're turning a yacht. So the future really is, what I just did with all of you here is a very, very tiny little baby stress mindset intervention, right? I mean, there is a lot more to it. But this, having go through, giving you the data, having you reflect on a time in your life and write it down, and then write what would you do differently in the future, that's one of the very first steps on stress education. And that's something that you can take home to your shops. You know, I'll come do it. You want me? I can do it virtually and help you guys. I don't need more Grand Rounds invitation. That's not like what this is. My passion really is to just make sure that we're getting this information out there, because most of us are operating at that very basic knee-jerk fight or flight response. And without kind of the knowledge and the training and at least an introduction to things are different, we're not going to be able to change our path. Right, the path that we are on right now with this, I'm going to work, I'm feeling a ton of stress, I'm not really looking at anything else, I have high levels of cortisol, I'm tachycardic, anorexic, you know, or I can't stop eating, all I want to do is sleep. I mean, there's really kind of different ways that our bodies respond. But if we want to do anything with our learners and we want to teach them a new path, if we want to kind of change the culture of medicine and what this is in the future, this is one thing that we can do that actually shows physiologic changes. And it's not, you know, let's be more resilient, because that kills me whenever I hear talks where people are like, we just need to be more resilient. Every study that's out there has already demonstrated that everyone in medicine is resilient as hell. You have to be in order to get through the awful training of medicine, right? Like medical school and this delayed gratification and seeing all of our friends who didn't go into medicine, like going on vacations, and we're studying for med school. We're already resilient. This is not resilience. This is actual science on how to approach these different situations in our work setting to kind of help us survive. Any questions about this portion?
When you presented this talk to, you know, trainees or other people, what is their initial response? 'Cause I kind of feel like you have a room full. I mean, I'm in awe when we're sitting here. We have a group of 20 pseudo strangers.
More than 4.
And we're very willing to discuss things. But I think that we all have a shared, we've self-selected to be here, but we have a shared sense of we've been through, a lot of us have been there. Yeah. And the harder time I have is getting the trainees to understand it, because they're not open to that. They don't feel the need, you know, and it's like, yeah, it's just a bunch of you old guys telling us about how bad it was in the good old days, you know.
So I will tell you, I tend to take them by PGY class, because they're more willing to open up with people in their own class, and they're more willing to do it when nobody else is around. So if other attendings are around, if they're programmed, I'm not an APD anymore, and so now that I don't have direct rule over them, they're a lot more willing to get into this.
For me, the approach that I would always take is the modeling is really important, because they're kind of looking to you to learn that unsaid curriculum. So modeling, like, I go to therapy. I cried about this case yesterday after we went through it. What was last night like for you? What did you do? How did you cope? Did you have somebody that you could call? And just kind of like modeling some of those things that, like, it's okay to address your needs, like asking them, like, even though a lot of the residents would be like, I don't have time for a break, but like forcing them to go take a break, like showing them it's okay to do some of these things. And that's kind of the best way so far that personally I've found to try to make an impact, is just by really overtly trying to model some of this.
I've also just learned to just call that out as it is, that
I can imagine pretending you're the medical students here, or the residents, I can imagine many of you think this is a waste of your time. Because you could easily be spending this hour enjoying the sun outside, and here you are learning about mindfulness and meditation, which is a class that we teach the medical students. Because one time, actually, we gave this class, and I thought it went very well. And then shortly after, I saw on Twitter, it was Twitter then, that I can't believe they're making me spend an hour learning about meditation when I just had to deal with a patient who died. And so their experience is not wrong. Our teaching is also not wrong. We can be both true. So now I just call that out. I said, this is something that I, as an emergency physician, have found value because it's building skills for when those tough situations happen. If you are in a moment right now and you need that wonderful sun outside, please, I do not take attendance. I could care less if you're here. I actually am very frank about that, because then it's their choice to stay there. And then I tell them that I will guarantee that they will have a patient die in front of them. I will guarantee that some of those deaths will be because of them. And so when that moment happens, it's not a matter of if, it's actually a matter of when. And when that happens, I hope that they have the right resources or enough resources available for them to try out, instead of what probably they're gonna try right now without the things that we're gonna be sharing. And that, for me, they tend to listen a little bit more. I also like I'm thinking of like a Greg Goldner slide where you're kayaking into your whitewater rafting. And when the water is still calm, you're just learning to paddle. And a lot of these things that we're talking about are really just skills of paddling. Because we don't know when that next, rapid level 5 thing that happens, and you're like, I am not an outdoors person, clearly. But when you're like in that like moment, you're like, crap, like I need to like control my breathing because I need to be able to focus because I'm hyperventilating right now. And then I actually don't know, I didn't know that I'm just like stuck there, because some people freeze, like polyvagal theory, some people freeze and some people get hyperactivated and they get agitated, right? But knowing how people respond, and I tell them that. And maybe that's the reason why I haven't seen another tweet about that class. But my hope is that they're paying attention, because now they're a lot more clinically relevant for them. Hearing, I think, as you alluded to, like we have to model that, like it happens to us. We're not just teaching it for fun. We're actually teaching it because we go through this and we're learning from our own experiences.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Thank you. So at Emory, I had an interesting experience teaching some mindfulness skills to the residents that were particular for work in EM on shift. And I gave it to 60 of the residents, and a month later we put them through a simulated medical resuscitation, and we gave them a very brief mindfulness intervention just before it. And they got that or a control. So they did it twice, separated by a few months. And it was very interesting. We found that the first years, it actually hurt them because they didn't have the space in their head to take on that and also manage the lists of things that were in their head. The second years, it didn't hurt or help them. And the third years, it helped very significantly. And that was independent of year in training, because the third years that got the intervention first did significantly better than the third years that got the control first. So what I took from that was the year of training and making space for them when they're teaching new skills is very important, because they just don't have the space in their head to possibly apply those skills early on. They just need more room to talk about it and do it. And I 100% agree with you about separating by PGY year when you're talking to them. You know, groups of 7 to 10, no more than that if you can manage that. Yeah.
There's also a lot of unlearning that they have to do, right? Like you expect them to be perfect, good grades, not mess up, and all of a sudden you just screw up everything. Like you show up in your first day as an intern, you order a Motrin, and the nurse will be like, "Why did you get Motrin? Give a Tylenol." And you're like, and for us it's nothing, but for them it's like crap. Like that's like a C. Like I don't get C's in my life, and so then and then all of a sudden they have to like. Either they get defensive and they blame themselves. So a lot of that, I think, is really challenging and important too.
All right, we're going to have this as our last comment.
I think one thing is that's very easy to slip into is the thought that learning is a character flaw. And so I try to like create space, like everybody messes up. That's actually how you get through difficult times. So don't feel bad because you didn't know the answer. You knew the wrong answer, and just don't do that one next time. So I say that learning is not a character flaw.
Yeah, and it takes a lot for us also as now senior or faculty or senior resident to acknowledge that we screw up a lot. Because if we don't know, we don't tell them that, then why would they feel comfortable telling us that?
I actually have a couple of photos saved in my like favorites part of my phone of some of my best screw ups. You know, like the Dobhoff that went into the lung all the way to the bottom and stuff. And then they're like, oh, I did this and I suck so bad. I was like, you want to see a picture of something I did? And I find that helps. Okay, so the next portion of this, I'm excited to talk about because this has kind of been my like major mission over the last couple of years, and it's kind of a little more individualized based, but I think some of the skills can extrapolate onto learners and things that we can teach others about how to prioritize themselves. Because if you think about medical training, right, we're taught the needs of the patient come first, right? We miss things at the hands of missing things with our family. We're at work, or you're on call, or you're doing work at home, or lots of things that we kind of take as just the expected because it's in service of the patient, which we relate to being our calling, and we often neglect ourselves and our own health and what we need, and then you end up getting burnt out and you pour from an empty cup, which isn't so much fun. So these are our objectives.
And the other audience are your early to early mid faculty.
Probably early mid faculty.
These are the ones who need this a lot. So the things we do here, you got to take home to them.
So who in this room would still consider themselves junior faculty, resident, or med student? I see you over there. Okay. But no, you're 100% right? Especially in academics. And I'm going to say some things during this talk that are going to sound a little sacrilegious to a purely academic audience that I have here, right? But you get on the yes train, right? Like, you're accepting all these things. You're like, yes, I'll do that. I'll be on that sepsis committee. I love sepsis. Oh, I'll also be on that pharmacy committee. I love pharmacies. Right? Okay? So you end up feeling like this. Like, who feels like this? This is an adequate picture of your life, somewhat, right? You're juggling lots of things. You have a less than calm expression on your face. Like, there's a lot going on, right? So why is that? Oftentimes you're feeling that way because we get to a point and we take on so much that you feel like your priorities and your time are not spent in alignment with each other. Okay? So again, some of the sacrilegious things we're going to talk about, I'm going to try to put little seeds in your brain that it's okay to prioritize yourself, make goals for yourself. It's okay to get paid for your time, which is that's probably the worst thing you can say at an academic conference ever. And what does that look like? And then how can we free up some time, and how can we maybe start saying no, which for those super junior faculty over here, I know it's very hard for you two here in the back, but alas, okay? So here we have the wellness wheel, right? Because we're going to talk more than just about occupational-based things. So we're going to take a little bit of time, and I want you guys to think of a goal in each one of these categories that you want to accomplish in the next year. And I probably should have doubled up slides, because when you make a goal, right, we're going to think about SMART goals. Right? We're not going to be like, well, your goal could be I want to run a marathon. But when you have that large goal, you have to break it down into smaller, smarter goals. Like, well, this next week, I would like to get off my couch and walk for a mile 3 times this week, right? Like, to get to the big goal, you have to break it down. So when you're thinking about SMART goals, feel free to make the goals in each one of your wellness wheels kind of small, but it's just something that you really want to either get started in or do, but for each one of these areas. I want to learn how to rebalance my 401k instead of having Fidelity do it automatically, because maybe that's not the best thing. That's one goal. That could be a small goal, right? Or like,
Sounds like a big goal.
Yeah.
yeah, with that attitude, it's a big goal, okay? You know? I want to learn if my community actually recycles all of the plastic bottles that I throw away. And if not, maybe I can write an angry letter to somebody. But it can be a small goal. It doesn't have to be like, I want to be the CMO 6 months from now.
10-minute
Yes,
exercise.
10-minute exercise, because it's going to take just a little bit of time. Yeah, 10 minutes, stretch, think of your goals while you...
This session that you're sitting here for hours and we don't have that.
Bio break, get more water.
You can buy the smart.
So we'll do 10 minutes on the clock.
Great students. You just continue doing the homework to the bathroom.
I wrote that we needed pen and pads in here, so.
Do we need more pen and pads?
There's only 4 people signed up, so they've got like 8.
I stole all of them from another room.
Was it wilderness?
I did think
Saving the trees.
You just stole their splitting material.
They're not going to be able to do their med wars now. Okay. So, no? So I think most folks are kind of back, not seeing a lot of active writing. Okay, who wants to share a goal? My heart would be really happy if it's non-occupationally related, but I'll take it. Yeah.
My husband and I really tackled down at COVID and didn't socialize with anyone outside our circles. And we've been talking about wanting to reemerge into our social circles physically. We talk to people, we go to meetings, but we don't necessarily socialize with them outside. So focusing on that part, I said I was going to make a list of the people that we wanted to reconnect with, make a list of activities that we could do with them that would be social, get us out of the house or engage with those folks, and then schedule 1 to 3 a month depending on our availability. And most likely, I think, based on that, we would see about 75% of those people within a year.
I like that. Other goals? Yeah.
I don't really need that. I can fill a room with my voice.
SAEM wants us to record because then they'll be mad at us.
Okay, I shall speak directly into the microphone. I tried my best to keep my list very brief. So, on the physical, I have decided my goal for the next couple of weeks is going to be to walk each of my 2 dogs once a day.
I love that goal.
Yeah.
It's very smart.
Specific.
And active.
Yeah.
Yes, not only is it specific, the 2 of them don't walk very well together in company. I feel like I'm a tug
Love
toy.
the challenge.
But each of them by herself is a little bit civilized. But you know what they say about girl dogs?
No, I don't actually.
Oh, it's a real bitch.
Thank you very much.
So for emotional for me, I put, I have a 16-month-old daughter, and she's my first. And so for me, just more reflection and staying in the moment and remembering to just be present with her because it just goes by so quickly. And I look at pictures from last year, and then I look at her, and I'm like, I just don't know who this toddler is. So just being able to be more present with my family and in the moment.
I love that goal. All right. So we've got goals for each areas, but you might be thinking like, I'm not sure, Nicole, when you think these goals are going to get accomplished, because I thought we already discussed in the beginning, I'm already doing this with my life. So where's it going to, something's got to give, right? So the next thing we're going to do is essentially do an inventory of our time. I teach a class at Agnes Scott, which is a women's liberal arts college in Atlanta. And I love doing this activity with the post-bac students where they force them to write down how they spend every minute of 48 hours, like granularly. And it's amazing to get some of their logs back. Some of them were like, I woke up, spent 15 minutes on TikTok. Then I went to the bathroom, brushed my teeth, approximately 2 minutes. Like, I really make them get granular, right? Because how much time do you have in a week? 168 hours, right? And sometimes, and I can't remember, do you remember what book this is from where she had, it was like one, I don't know if it was like Carol Dweck or who, but would do this with folks. And people were always amazed at like how much time just kind of went wherever, that once they actually took a really granular look at it, they were kind of upset about how they were spending their time because it really wasn't in alignment with what they wanted to be accomplishing. So I'm not going to have you do all 168 hours, but I want you to write down a list of all the activities that you feel like you do or work on every week. Everything is it, even if it's grocery shopping, picking up dog refuse outside, raking leaves, taking care of your child, cooking meals, eating. So a list of everything you feel like you do in a week. And if you want to put kind of like time approximations, like, well, I should be getting 8 hours times 7 days or of sleep or whatever, but it will take just a couple of minutes and try to make a very thorough list. There's some psychologist writes about it though, the time and mood. I was like, it sounds like that movie Tremors, or with the like monsters that goes underground. That's not ideal. Okay, how are we doing on our lists? We feeling good? Feeling pretty good about it? Okay. So here's what you're gonna do. Take a look at your list. Do you like doing that particular thing or activity? Does it, spark joy in the Marie Kondo kind of thing? Like, I like doing that. If you don't like doing it, put a star next to it. If you don't like doing it, put a star next to it. Even if it's work related, if you don't like doing it, put a star next to it. Okay, second part. Is it congruent with your goals? Okay, so maybe your goal is, maybe a huge occupational goal of yours is to move up to the next professor rank, in the next whatever years. And you are like, yes, there are a couple of things that I am going to do because it is congruent with my major goals. If it is not congruent with your goals, put a star next to it. I'm giving you a little more time because this one can be harder. You're like, what were those goals again? Okay, then lastly, is it a must item? Okay, and when I mean must item, AK likes to make this joke like, I don't always enjoy feeding my child, but I must feed him because if I don't, CPS will come and bad things will happen. Right? Like, I must sleep. If I don't, studies have shown I will become psychotic. I must do it. Is it a must item? Not like, oh, I must be on the sepsis committee. That's not a must item. If you don't do it, somebody else will do it.
These are usually like Maslow's basement.
Hierarchy of needs.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's like food, water, air, sleep,
shelter.
These are basement items.
Okay. Is it a must? Okay. If it's not a must, put a star. Thank you. That was the second part I neglected. If it's not a must, if it's not something you must do, put a star next to it. So there's three stars. Okay, first star, do you like doing it? If you like doing it, great. It doesn't get a mark. If you don't like doing it, put a star. Ick. If it's not congruent with your goals, put a star. Right? So some of these items might have 1 star, 2 star, 3 stars. Okay? Okay, I apologize. That was my lack of clear communication. And then the last, is it a must? So if it's not a must, put a star next to it. Does that make sense? There's nothing starred. You love everything on your list. We should switch roles. You should be up here. Hoping. God willing, yes. Okay. Guess what we're going to try to do with those 3-star items, and maybe some of the 2 stars, but especially the 3-star items. We're going to get rid of them. How many of you guys have at least one 3-star item? 2-star items.
It depends on if you describe it as a must.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Laundry's not a must. Cleaning the house.
Laundry's not a must. You can buy new clothes. Or you can make somebody else do it, right? Like, no one's gonna die and the police aren't gonna come. You know? So here's just kind of the purpose of this thought. Here's the purpose of this thought exercise, is to try to find things that you're doing throughout the week that don't bring you joy, that aren't in line with your goals, and that you don't absolutely have to do.
Like, no one will die if you don't do it.
Okay?
That is literally, the must items are, it is life or death. Black and white, life or death. If it is not life or death, it is not a must.
And so the purpose of this is to look at the value of your time and to try to decide, like, is this something you can offload or outsource? So that interim question we're going to talk about is, well, what's the value of my time? How do I decide if that 3-star item is something I have to keep? Or, you know, how can I offload that? And what is the value of my time? And how much am I willing to kind of give up? Because in reality, for a lot of us, time is money, right? When it comes to how we're going to spend it. Well, when it comes to freeing up I know you're shaking your head, but when it comes to the things that people, especially in our age brackets and career brackets, do this extra stuff, there might be a way to offload it, but there's always a conversation that you have in your head of like, well, is it worth the money? Is it worth that time? And so what's the value of your time? So you can make it a monetary thing. You could say, well, it's my hourly rate. That's the value of my time. It might also mean something a little bit more non-specific, like, well, how much would it mean to me to be able to take a 1-hour nap? Or what would it mean for me joy-wise to spend another hour with my family? So you can kind of look at it in a non-specific monetary term. I found an article from a number of years back where a lot of people agreed that like they weren't going to do anything that they could pay somebody else $25 an hour or less to do. So I adjusted that for inflation. So maybe there's just like a basement kind of thing where you're just like, any task that I don't like doing, right? Because if you're like, oh, I'll pay someone to garden for me, but if you like gardening, obviously that's something you might want to keep. But if it's doing laundry and you're like, I'm not going to do anything with my time that I can't use it in a more more productive way, or reproductive way, sorry. Maybe there's a basement value. I don't know, that might mean something different for everybody, right? So again, maybe it's in the more kind of, well, what if I could take that hour? Like, I know a lot of moms that have kind of mother's helpers type folks that come in and help do laundry and things, because they're like, when I am home, I would like to spend that hour of time being more present with my child and have somebody else doing some of these things in the background, so that I'm not folding laundry and trying to play with my kids. I just want to play with my kids. So sometimes it's more of a feelings, community-based, more of a value judgment. But some people are very kind of financially black and white. And they're like, no, this is actually a financial moniker of what my time's worth. So that's going to be different from you, okay? So where I'm going with this is that if you feel completely overwhelmed and bogged down, especially with a lot of tasks that can be outsourced, consider it. These are all the things that I've, over time, at one point or another, have successfully outsourced, right? We know about grocery shopping and meal prep. You can do cleaning, housework, obviously, bookkeeping, accounting, tax prep, pet care, laundry, making appointments, phone calls. If you're a social media person, like that's kind of important to you, but you don't, like it actually is something that fits in line with your goals and you want to do, but you can have somebody help you with that. Clothes shopping, child education, tutoring, childcare. You can outsource a lot of things, okay? So in addition to emergency medicine, I also have my ABOM in obesity medicine. So I talk with a lot of my patients about like their food choices and stuff. And it often comes up, they're like, I'm too busy to cook. I have a lot of these bad kind of dietary habits because X, Y, Z, usually time related. So there are a lot of ways that you can free up time in relation to how you feed yourself. Most of us probably know about Instacart. Other meal services that I recommend to patients, because they normally have filters for either low sodium or low carb options, which work for a lot of my patients, is So Well Metabolic Meals, Purple Carrot, Sunbasket. I don't get any money from any of these people, but you can have food and meal delivery services. There are actually a lot of local options if you live in a larger-ish community. I live in the Atlanta area and found for my patients there are 7 locally owned small business, chef-based businesses where they will make and they will meal prep for you and deliver it, or you can come pick it up at a centralized location. And a lot of other docs in Atlanta I know utilize it as well as their on-call meals or their shift meals, so that they know they have something healthy to eat. Ways to go about, how many of you have somebody that cleans your house for you? That's something that I'm my ADD brain, I cannot clean my own house. I can't, it will take me 8 hours. It takes somebody that does it really well proficiently 3 hours. So for me, I don't clean my own house, right? Because I'm just I can be really way more productive with that time and what's going on in here. Same thing.
She's like me. She lives with a bunch of boys. My pee goes in the hole. I'm not cleaning up any other toilets.
Agreed. Yeah, well, you come over and you tell them that. Okay, but right? So you can go on care.com and find somebody. Usually we use local recommendations of who's got a really great, person that they like. You can also outsource laundry. So at one point when our family was super in the weeds, there was a company that would literally come pick up our laundry in giant blue bags and bring it back the next day folded. Not that the clothes ever went where they were supposed to. They just kind of stayed in the bag and we just kind of took them out of the bag. But, that was so my spouse and I were we hate doing this, so much laundry in this house. So that's something that we outsourced, right? Outsourcing it actually brought me some joy, but alas. Okay.
How do you do this? Because I understand what you're saying, and it makes total sense. But it also assumes a very advanced degree of privilege, financial well-being. I mean, if I said this to some of the residents or some of the medical students, they're like, we don't have resources to do something.
Does your residency have, for instance, when I was a resident, we had a couple of resident spouses where one of the spouses actually wanted to make this her side gig and would do some of these things. So I 100% agree with you, but we're also operating, and hence the conversation about what is the value of your time, and that is going to mean something very different for everybody in the room. And so that's, but for some, that level of outsourcing might look like Instacart, or it might look here, or it might look here. So you are 100% correct. There's definitely some privilege there. And that's where that kind of internal discussion about what is kind of that value of your time, what's that quote unquote worth. I think you were going to say something.
In resident level salary, which is slightly above the non-attending salary, mine is the local Kroger pickup.
Mm-hmm.
I can order it at 2 in the morning when my mind's going crazy and pick it up on my way home from work. And
Mm-hmm.
it's free for me. So there are some of these things that you're suggesting that fit all of those financial considerations.
In
The other
residency,
thing- I'm sorry.
oh.
And the other thing is folding laundry while I'm talking to my friends on the phone, doing that multitasking.
I'm not going to fold laundry.
In residency, I did not want any birthday presents. I don't want any Christmas gifts. I would like a housekeeper once a month. And we came to an agreement with family that that's what happened, and I loved it. I didn't get any clothes I didn't need. I got a clean house.
Yeah.
That is brilliant. I trained in the Bronx, and when I was looking for parking in the Upper East Side, I would choose, I could either sleep 2 more hours, or I'm gonna circle around looking for parking. For those of you who live in in New York City, that's a very common thing. And so you're right, it is a privilege, but also I chose to pay for parking on certain days just because I would get to sleep, or I would treat myself. So I would see it sometimes as a treat, but I think labeling it as that also is good. I remind myself, I'm treating myself for this because I deserve this.
Doug, the other thing too is there are local CSAs. Some hospitals have it's partner associations where they kind of get involved with some of these things. And so while you're right, going to a resident and saying, you don't have to do any of these things at all and you're gonna exchange your money for all of them is, I mean, unless they're just independently wealthy from whatever, it's not applicable. But I think a lot of them don't even know about a lot of these things and options, so just presenting them with the options so that they have the opportunity to kind of select is beneficial. This is, I mean, this whole workshop that I've done in the past before, I've always targeted towards like early to mid faculty, where you'll probably get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of people just crossing all kinds of things off their list.
The other thing I'll say is when I was in APD and I would have like the meetings with the residents about like, hey, how's it going? I really tried to drill in on like what some of their Maslow's hierarchy pain points were. And for some of our some of us, but for some of our learners, they're really struggling with the base level. Like, remember one resident, she's like, I feel like I have no food in my house, and I really struggle with that because I actually like to cook, and kind of went through this whole thing about how there were just more time and mental barriers about like shopping and stuff. We've done the CSA before, which was pretty awesome. But if there are these like pain points that kind of feed into this Maslow's like lower level, those might be areas where your programs can target some of their wellness initiatives. Like, you know, if you give them Christmas or holiday whatevers, is it like, would some of them prefer a gift card to a Kroger or a gift card to one of these services? Or is it like maybe you have a very family heavy residency and like helping to find a babysitter so that some of them can go on a date night or something, you know what I mean? Like, so there are ways you can kind of be, maybe it's not completely outsourcing, but creative with your wellness program so that you can focus in on some of those type pain points.
We also underestimate the creativity of our residents. And so maybe holding spaces like this and asking them, like, what have you learned to outsource? I think that this idea of like, oh, I'm just going to ask I do that now. Like I tell my mom like what I want, and I give her the link so that she knows exactly what to buy me, so that I don't have to return something, right? Like, I think these are just ways for us to figure out how to, I don't know, get some of these needs met.
So the last kind of part in this that I want to touch on is one of my favorites, and that is the discovery of the virtual assistant. And I've done this in a few different ways over the last maybe 5 years. So how many of you know what like a virtual assistant is, or what they do, or what they don't do? Okay. What do you know about them? Just shout out. Or what have you used them for? Or do you have one, or you've just heard of it?
I have not used Fiverr, but a good friend of mine at work uses them to call for deals, figure out plumbing for their house, or even like fight for their speeding tickets.
That is amazing.
I mean, like Jennifer Kenapiki-Comer is an expert on like
yes.
A lot of.
She's the master at this lecture.
She really is.
What about you? You raise your hand.
It's scheduled, but it's virtual assistants through work.
Yeah. So the beauty of potentially the home virtual assistant or someone that just works purely for you is they can really do a lot of these things that take up time that you really hate doing. Things I've used mine for are scheduling doctor's appointments, calling, hey, find me 4 top-rated concrete contractors in the Atlanta area, call them and set up an appointment to come over to give an estimate on one of these 3 days. Then bam, bam, all of that garbage. Like, I don't like doing that kind of stuff. I've also had one of them fill out my bio sketch for me, just the initial rough draft. I mean, I looked over it, but like, I was like, take this information, put it into here. What else? Yeah, send people birthday presents, make terrible phone calls to like places who have wronged me and I need to get my money back or whatever, answer emails, schedule things, like lots of different stuff. So some of that like mental, cognitive, just like stuff that might kind of float around in your brain, you can outsource to somebody if it can be done virtually. Different places you can find virtual assistants, Upwork. I put in Fiverr because they're really more job specific. So if you need like word editing, video editing, graphic design, so they're more of a freelance space. I don't know that they have a very dependable like virtual assistant program. And then again, I don't get any money, but I've worked with a couple of actual virtual assistant companies. And the one so far that I've liked the best is called Physician Focused. So they have a virtual assistant company where they only work with like people in healthcare. I think they've expanded outside of physicians, but it's just people in healthcare. So they understand sometimes things like licensing applications and credentialing applications and can fill out paperwork. And essentially you email them the tasks and you give them a time frame of like, I need this done by whatever. And in the background, they get it done for you. And normally you get assigned to like one specific person so that you guys kind of learn each other's styles and expectations. And it's been fantastic. I don't have quite this setup anymore because in the obesity medicine part, I've actually started a private practice, so I need somebody that's with me a little bit more full-time. And so I stopped working with Physician Focus and just hired my own person through LinkedIn. And you can actually post job postings in LinkedIn for free. And that can be a way to find kind of all kinds of stuff. So if you didn't know that you can do that, you can post a job listing for free on LinkedIn if you're a part of LinkedIn. So now we know kind of what our goals are. Now we know a little bit more about maybe how can we free up some time that we can push over to accomplishing some of those goals. Now, how do you keep the time? And the big thing we want to talk about here and make this maybe a little bit of a group discussion too for a few minutes is like, let's practice saying no, right? Because how do you keep, if we're going to eliminate some of those 2 and definitely 3-star things, how do we keep from putting those things back on our plate and just sucking up all of our time? Any thoughts?
So one of the things that I sometimes will coach our faculty, because this is like a big boundary setting issue, is practice the following response.
Yeah.
Thank you for that really interesting opportunity. Let me think about it and get back to you.
Arlene, did you read my slides? Did you read our slides? Right. It can feel really uncomfortable to say no, right? And sometimes when you feel like you're being asked somebody, there might be the little voice in your head that says, man, if I don't do it, who's going to do it? Those of you who are wise in the room know they will always find somebody to do it, right? Like we always make the joke, like if you drop dead, unfortunately, I hope that doesn't happen, but they will fill that hole in all of the different ways, especially professionally. You have been there, right? Like the work will get done, right? Somebody will do it. You don't have to be the person that does it. Yeah.
I think especially earlier on in my career, I learned this from Esther Chu. There's 3 questions that I would ask. Is it good for me? Is it good for my boss? Is it good for my advancement? If it's only 2 out of 3, it's going to be a work in progress. If it's 1 out of 3, the likelihood of it like not being so fun is going to be very high, so it's going to be an easy no for me. 3 out of 3, I used to say a lot of yes, and then I realized I overcommit to so many different things because I like so many different things. So the 4th thing that I add now is I look at my calendar and I ask myself, like, which of these do I need to let go to fit this in my calendar? Like literally look at my calendar, can I fit this in my calendar? If I cannot, then I have to decide, like maybe not now, I'll do later, or definitely not now, and then I'll do this response. Or I bump out the other one, like, thank you, I've been doing this for 3 years, I love this, I think it's time for me to let this go, please consider this person to take on this role, that way I can take the other one. So those are my 4 things that I consider when I say no.
Yeah, so this perfect phraseology for how to say no. Thank you for presenting me with this great opportunity to be on the sepsis committee. Unfortunately, I'm unable to take on additional projects at this time, but I think a key portion here is too, like, how can you build in sponsorship in your response and not feel like you're leaving the other person hanging? So we talk about this super heavy in the ADIM and like women's kind of sponsorship type areas, like, all right, maybe not me, but like, here are some other women that would be great at this project, or just other people in general. But this can be a great mindful opportunity for you to be an incredible sponsor for some other people who, might be trying to get on the ladder and climb their way up and things like that, instead of a flat out no. And then it leaves the other person feeling like you're still invested in the process and in the success of whatever they're asking you to do, and make it a little bit more likely that if something else comes up that you might be really more interested in, that they still might pass that to you. Because I think there's a feeling too where you might feel like, well, if I just keep saying no, I'm not going to be asked to do anything. But this kind of can put you in a space where you're not closing the door completely. Maybe you're providing some sponsorship and kind of helping the project reach its goals.
Do you notice what's not there?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. There is no I'm sorry. It's thank you, not I'm sorry.
So this is also a really good, I've had working with some of the junior faculty, the fellows, and this is, the classic one. I'm too busy, I'm not doing what I want to do, I feel like I can't say no. And this is a great plug to say then spend a day and create an IDP. Create a development plan for yourself that sits and says what it is you want to do. Because otherwise, if you say, thank you, but there's a great opportunity, I'm too busy, then the next response is, well, what are you doing? Right? Especially if it's someone who has power over you, your program director, your division chief, whatever. And so if they get a IDP and they can create one and it gets signed off by their supervisor, their division chief or section leader or whatever, then they can use that to come back and say, well, remember how we discussed that I'm doing too much of this and you wanted me to give up A and B, and I did. This doesn't fit into what we agreed you think I need to be doing. And suddenly it's not them saying no or pushing back. It's like, oh, yeah, you're right. I wanted you to do this, so this was your priority. And it's much more productive for them, and at the same time, it allows their supervisor to say, okay, yeah, I shouldn't be making her do this.
It probably also just kind of creates that door of like, please only send me stuff that is in line with this.
Yes.
So it's really taking those
that
goals and core values and cementing them.
Is this good for me? Is it good for my boss? Is it good for the department? That's the other thing. Sometimes, there's always this gut work that...
I think of the boss and the department as the same. I don't give them 2 credits, just 1.
just 1 credit.
I will say, though, that I think a couple of things. I think your point about like IDP is helpful. Another thing, perhaps, that will be helpful is to make sure that when you tell other people, like, hey, Doug might be interested in this, I kind of let that person know, hey, Doug, I told them about this opportunity, number one, so that you also get credit for the work that you're doing. Otherwise, if you do a lot of these silent things, then eventually you realize, like, I don't hear back from these people, right? Because you don't get attribution, number one. And then number two, it's an opportunity, at least for the ones that I'm mentoring, to coach them on like, this is how I said no. So if this does not align with you, you're perfectly okay to say no also. I'm just letting you know that here's some ways of doing it. I think also I wanted to just use this time to acknowledge that uncompensated work is something that's very common for us, especially in academia. And so unless we write those things down, and I did this when I was in APD, when I was, and I realized I was like doing so many different things that were really not part of the residency, and yet it was good for the department, it's good for the residency, but was not clearly part of the, so then in the end, whenever they asked me to do more things, I just couldn't. And so when we all, actually all the APDs, we sat down and it's like, can we just write out all the things that we're doing? And we realized that we were doing way more than we were expecting. So then it was nice to then say, all right, well maybe instead of X number of things, you just do half of that because it's unrealistic. So involving the leadership in looking at these things that you're doing not only gives them guidance on what is really more aligned with your values, but also gives you a better way to say no. Because one, I literally had this conversation with my former PD. I was like, I love this, but like here are the things that I'm currently doing. Which of these do we want to deprioritize right now so I can take this new role? And miraculously, I'd love to then be able to say no to the things that I hate doing, because then I can choose this one thing now that makes more sense.
The other thing is that we had a junior faculty who's on fire and amazing, but he came to me really frustrated because he got a discussion with the chair.
Sure.
And the chair basically said, "You're doing this to yourself." And he was like, he's like, "I asked you to do X number of this type of activity, and you did 3 times that. I didn't ask you to go and volunteer to do this for every single residency and every single fellowship in the school. I suggested you do like 3 or 4 of them, and you've done 12 of them this year." That's, you took it too far. How do you pull back? And what I realized is that for that individual, that was really an important lesson, even though he was furious, because he's like, "I'm doing exactly what the chair told me to do." I'm like, well, no, you're not. You overcommitted, and they want you to pull back a little bit now. That was kind of an awkward discussion, and yet it's that same idea. There's good, but sometimes there's too much good.
Mm-hmm. Uncompensated work.
Right.
Call it that.
Right, and you
These
can't,
are
and
uncompensated
then you're
work.
complaining because you don't have time to do anything else. It's like, well, but you're the one that volunteered to do all these other activities.
I have, okay, let's do this part first, and then I have one comment about that, the sacrilegious comment. Okay. So I think a really important thing to remember about like the goals and the habits is we have to remember that it takes time to develop habits, right? On average, 66 days to incorporate a habit. And so these changes can come slowly, right? Like you're gonna feel very frustrated if you feel like you're gonna go home and kind of blow things up and your life's gonna be like really in line with all your values and this is gonna be amazing. It's gonna take time. And so you have to take baby steps. And that's why when talking about goals, feel free to make them feel sort of smaller, right? And more accomplishable, okay? So it takes time to make a habit. We can have a couple questions and comments, but I do have one thing on that line of uncompensated work that I want to say, because I feel very strongly about it, much to my past chair's dismay, is that there are some things like that we just do kind of uncompensated because it's in line with like our academic packet and things like that, right? So these committees and things like that, volunteering, giving lectures, like, and it might be written to our contract, like as a part of being core faculty, et cetera. There are some activities, though, that you might be asked to do that you should be compensated for. So when your institution asks you to go to some additional trainings, specific trainings that now they've decided that everyone's got to do this additional bullshit training, I say, that's fantastic. I assume that since you've decided that this activity is integral and indispensable to my work, that I will be compensated for my time. Because as a part of the Fair Labor Act, and there have been 2 Supreme Court cases since then, that if an activity has been deemed indispensable and integral to you and the functioning of your job, they have to pay you for your time. And I will tell you that 3 out of 5 times I've been able to get this time compensated for. But it really irks me when we're asked to do things that like if you're core faculty or faculty somewhere, you're like, yes, I'm going to give lectures. Like, I obviously kind of like doing that, or I understand it's a part of the nature of like my position. But there are some things that you will be asked to do that I think there's some sort of like bullshit internal narrative that goes on with HR where they're like, well, they're already very highly compensated individuals, so it's cool for them to come to this additional thing on their off time, and it's fine, we won't compensate them for it. I hate that, and they can't do it. So my most recent example of this is, again, I work locums now, and one of the shops, they're like, oh, this particular hospital wants you to take ATLS. It's a part of their bylaws. I was like, well, that's great. I'm ABEM certified, so that's not really a thing anymore. And they're like, it's in the bylaws, we can't get around it. I said, that's fabulous. That's 2 full days of work. I'm guessing that you'll be compensating me for that, correct? And at first they're like, oh, no, we don't really do that. Or like, then I won't be doing it. Like, my time has to come out of a bucket. It comes out of like from my family bucket, my other work bucket, personal time for myself. And that fell in line with an activity that legally should be compensated for. So I just want to throw that out there because I do think as doctors, and especially in academics, there's this assumption that we will do a lot outside of our roles in terms of uncompensated activities. And that's my spiel.
I'm curious how people have navigated this. I see.
So we also made the same case in our institution, UC Davis, because if you think about our other healthcare colleagues, nursing, physical therapy.
Same trainings, they get paid.
Yes, exactly right. It's done as part of their compensated time, and we're expected to do it for free. So.
And they get all real jittery when you're like, if you refer to the past 2 Supreme Court cases and the Fair Labor Act, I'm assuming that blah, 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 blah. And they're like, oh, let me look into that.
And I wonder how well that would go over with locums group.
They paid for my time. I said, I'm credentialed at 5 other hospitals. I don't have to go to that hospital. If you need somebody to work there that badly, pay for my time. Otherwise, find somebody else.
Did you do the ATLS courses?
I did.
And you got away with it?
I got paid for it. Absolutely.
Thanks, I'll try it.
What's that?
Thanks, I will try that.
Absolutely. Oh, they also said, by the way, please don't tell anybody else about this because we don't do this very often. And this is what I like to do with that information. I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. All right, thanks, guys. Yes, please tell everybody. Tell everybody. All right.
We're gonna, all right. Do we have time to take a break?
Oh, yeah. Always have time.
3:07.
Because I know we
Take
will
like
workshop like
5
systems levels
Yeah.
changes.
Take like
Okay.
5 minutes stretch.
We'll take a 5-minute break and then we're going to come back and
5
work
minutes.
through how to workshop
How to take it home.
changes at the systems level. We've done mindset, we've done our life, now let's look at our shop. We're hitting it at all 3 levels.
Oh, you can sit there.
We really shouldn't go visit? Oh, I was like, oh,
You always have such
I was thinking that was Apollo. That's part of what this last year was really talking about. I know, it so my kids. Are you kidding? Yes.
But at the same time.
That's amazing. Not maternal fetal medicine.
Most people at SAEM, very few people have noticed.
Probably very few are actually thinking what it's about.
George. Thank you for your trust on stress. I really appreciate it. No, it is. It's funny because I'm in South Carolina and I have some collaborators that do some work in psychology. And there was a grad a couple of years ago who was really wanting to talk about positive impacts of stress. And she was really wanting us to kind of have a sort of a mindset change about stress. And I got where she was going with it. And at the time I was like, but my psychology so right now, we've always acknowledged
Yeah.
how to offload that.
Yeah.
And I think the mindset
No, I'm sure, I mean, your expertise would
do something about it. It's I'm not going to let you. But anyways.
Diagnosing a 35-year-old with metastatic breast cancer when her kids are in the room is not a positive.
Right.
You know, and that's like, I'm not going to be like, oh, stress is so, it's just a matter of like, I feel like if you know a little bit of the information, you don't have to go down the HPA axis.
Right, and I guess that's what I didn't realize is that there are actually different chemical stress pathways.
Yeah.
That is mediated differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I realized that part.
Oh, yeah, no, my pleasure.
Yeah, this is like, by the way,
I'm AK.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I was a little sweaty at one point.
Yeah, that did me. Like, it's the change. As soon as like the very first sip of wine, I'm like, oh, taking everything off. That's good. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I'm just going to
Thank
break
you.
in the middle of this lecture, so I can talk to you for a moment. South Carolina. Yeah. You said you're in Indianapolis? Is that what I overheard? Okay. Cool. And you're a lifer?
Yeah. So I'm in Indiana.
Okay.
I'm gonna use the restroom. Great. Go.
Okay.
Do you have the
Got it.
slide clicker thing?
All right. There we go.
Did we?
All right, it is 3:14. We're gonna keep motoring along and then hopefully get you guys, I know, pie time. And then hopefully get you guys out of here a little bit early so you can enjoy the rest of your afternoon. This last section is really focused on change management and how to take some of what you learned here home. And I think this is a pretty common theme. I know, Doug, you were in the session next door this morning. And I think a lot of the things apply when you come to conferences and you learn all of these ideas and you have these thoughts and initiatives that you want to take back to your shop. And particularly when it comes to things like well-being, I think there's a lot of motivation to bring what you learn from the shared experience here back to your own shops and address your particular problem. So I know at the very beginning when people shared in their introductions why they're here and what they're hoping to get out of it, this last part of the section is really hopefully to give you some tools in terms of how to address that going forward. Most of us sitting here have been at least vaguely interested in the wellness space.
preceding coming to this session, and I'm sure you've had your own individual experiences of trying to put forth wellness initiatives in your own programs, in your own departments, and I'm sure those have gone swimmingly with widespread acceptance and open arms. But that being said, hopefully we'll give you a little bit more to chew on, and maybe some strategies that you haven't heard and can try when trying to approach some of these things. So this is important because I think increasingly healthcare is becoming much more complicated. You know, it used to be, you know, small hospital, single department, all the staff knew each other. It was sort of a very clean team environment. And now increasingly we are moving towards complex hospital networks, and people may not know each other that well, right? You're working with larger systems of physicians, nurses, other folks that all interact in the emergency department, and then you add in the layer of the trainees, and then this whole environment becomes much more complicated. And so whenever you're thinking about change, it's never in isolation. You're always working within a larger system. And I think one of the big mistakes that sometimes people make is that they fail to do their homework in some ways. And so, you know, you come from a conference here and you think, oh my God, I just learned of this amazing peer support program. We need to do this. And you start off with the idea, but really in order to have success, you need to back it up and think about what kind of obstacles am I going to face? What are my resources available? I did years ago now, I did a master's in medical education, and the director of that program had a saying that she used to tell us, and it has stuck with me over the years, and she used to say, you never want to be the unwanted solution to the unperceived problem. And I think fundamentally a lot of change management, particularly in the well-being space, can start off on that foot. And so things like, you know, we're gonna talk about Cotter's model of change management. There's Anderson and Anderson's book, Beyond Change Management, and a couple other models here. And so you can pick and choose. I mean, a lot of this is not necessarily rigid in the sense of must follow this one checklist, and you'll see a lot of overlap between the different models. But again, it's more just the framing and making sure you sort of think about all of these things and think it through prior to the implementation. Many of us are in the education space, curriculum. A lot of this is very parallel to curriculum development, doing a needs assessment, figuring out your goals and objectives, right? So if this all sounds very parallel, it is very parallel.
Yeah. Our goal is to make this a little bit more practical for you so that each of those things that you raised earlier, as Dr. Chung pointed out, we're hopefully going to tease out a little bit more. This idea of the highly matrix organization is something that I've heard about before, but became more relevant for me when I was trying, so in my role as the director of well-being in my department, I wanted to do something, and I thought it was just easy. It's like, oh, let's start this. And I can get buy-in from the chair, but then all of a sudden I realized, I won't get buy-in from this one section or this one group in our department or even outside the department, or yeah, scribes are great, but who's gonna pay for that? And then we talked about uncompensated work. And yet, do we invest that out of our own pocket in the emergency department, or is this a hospital problem? Many of these siloed areas can work together if we can find some sort of alignments, but I think finding that alignment and figuring out how to communicate that, for me, has not been easy. I trained in the Bronx. I'm very direct, and so when I took on this role, one of the first things that I asked my chair was, I need a coach. I need to be able to not only learn how to communicate these things to the CEO or the chief wellness officer or the chief of staff, and also it's just give me another person to bounce back ideas outside of the department, so they're agnostic to what's really happening, but they can at least help me frame certain things that maybe I'm too in it to realize that the challenge is maybe not that complicated as I'm envisioning them. Another part of mentioning this is that, especially in the wellness space, and I recognize so many of you here, I think that we forget that, especially doing work that addresses well-being, it can be very lonely because you feel like you're the one that's fighting for this one change all the time, and nobody else is seeing it the way that we do. And so this is a plug for the Wellness Committee, the different committees out there that really can create space for us to talk about many of the challenges that we tackled here today. So, yeah. And really it also gets us to this concept of the withins and the beyonds. There are many cool things that we want to change, but if it's outside the scope of my role, it really is, I'm not going to be the most effective. So I kept on referring earlier that I'm a recovering APD. That means that I don't do anything related to focusing on residency wellness because I'm not in it anymore. I don't go to the CCC meetings to understand like some common themes that the residents are experiencing. So for me to come up with ideas and tell them to do certain things, it's really not helpful. Similarly, at our shop, we have a very robust pediatric emergency medicine team. I don't work in PEM, and so for me to make recommendations for PEM, it's not fair for them. And so the solution then is to then get somebody in PEM who's motivated to work in this same area and work and partner with them. I think my point of sharing this is that so long as we can clarify the boundaries of what we're not allowed to do, I love rules, only specifically to tell me what I cannot do. So if they tell me we have to use the mic, we will use the mic. But earlier, some of you who were earlier here, we said, well, maybe we can put the mic on the table. It's still on, it's still capturing something, but we're not like attached to like holding it. And then of course, like this happened, and so we've expanded. And so understanding what is within and beyond our control is very powerful.
I mean, I think one of the things that you just said really resonated with me, and that a lot of times this work feels very lonely. You're often like the champion or the director or the point person or the coach or whoever it is in your department, which is great, right, to be identified in that particular leadership role, but oftentimes it can feel like you're the only voice really pushing for change. And you'll see as one of the very, very early steps in change management, things are much better in teams, right? Forming your coalition and finding a group around you, whether it's locally in your department, right? But it could even be across the institution, right? So even if you're struggling to find your team sort of in your natural home base, you can always look around, and certainly national groups like SAEM can be very helpful for finding a group, but certainly I think fundamentally it's much easier to go at it with a group of people, even one other person, than feeling like you're totally alone in this process.
Yeah. All right. So it will feel like you're in this masterclass on change management. So we're going to be giving you some of the things that are common that you'll hear about or you'll read about. So the PDSA or the PDCA by Deming. Number one is you plan. Like, what are we trying to accomplish here? And then you do something after you plan that, right? And then the S is you study. And again, you're probably reading this. But the goal here is it's iterative. There are a ton of limitations with the PDCA if you just do it, or the PDSA, if you strictly follow this. And so what our goal here also is to kind of expand this and maybe incorporate a little bit of McKinsey. So McKinsey 7S is like understanding that there are several nodes that are important in tackling a particular issue that we're dealing with. So for instance, like, who are the staff that's going to be affected? So when I talked about like creating a debriefing after a critical event in the emergency department, we have to partner with the nurses, because I can't just expect the attendings to say something, train the attendings, and then the residents are like, you want me to do the debriefing, but like I have to see the other patients. Like, are we just not gonna see patients? And if we do that, like the nurses will be like, but the patients keep on asking us what to do. And so like, how do we create partnerships with this? The styles, like each of us have different styles of communicating or working with each other. And so for me, that's why it's helpful, I still have my coach, like to have a coach, to then understand that, all right, so when I work with Arlene, this is how she would communicate. And when I work with AK, this is how she would communicate. We all kind of work the same, so that's sort of we're with the hashtag Wellness Unicorn. But I think like figuring out, like especially when I talk to my chief wellness officer, or if I know that my chair is very data driven, I need to come in like with a lot of data when I present something. And so figuring out those styles can be helpful. Skills, like what are the skill sets that's needed for us to be able to implement this one change. So you mentioned earlier you wanted to change the culture a little bit in this residency program. Well, tell me more about that.
We're just a newer program, and we're also small.
Sure.
So differences can stand out a lot, but it's interesting they also know each other very well, because this is an interesting dynamic that I'm not used to. And obviously not everybody's going to get on the same page and be all together and stuff, but it really stands out. We just need to at least align things a little
Sure. So even figuring out that shared value. So
Yes.
so even like sitting down, like maybe in this one program we care so much about research. Just say that. Just talk about it, as opposed to this like hidden expectation that people are then doing on the side because they want to fulfill something, right? We're all good people, right? At the end of the day, we want to do a good job. But if it's not clear, then I don't know what that means. So I'll share with you, for me, when I first took on the role, our chair was tasked by the School of Medicine that we needed to be more academic. And I don't know what that means, because when I was hired, I'm a clinical educator. When I was hired, I was specifically told you don't need to do research. In fact, I never did research. I was telling Doug, actually, this is actually a nice circle of conversation. I saw Doug earlier. I said, hey, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but my very first paper was with you. And that's because I've been an attending for several years, but we were never expected to publish until this new thing that happened, right? And so when our chair started, I asked her, I was like, how many papers are we supposed to publish? And she's like, 2 to 3 on average. I'm like, 2 to 3 per year? And so these are literally the conversation, right? This is me before my coaching. And so I'm like, so 2 to 3 per year. All right.
He's at Stanford, in case you missed that.
But then I was like, but we don't publish. Like, I don't know how to go through the IRB. And so she's like, all right, well, so then we have a human potential team. And so we talked about, I was like, is 2 to 3 a legit thing? Is this doable for us? And so we talked about it as we ho-hummed, and we were like, that is impossible. This is like, mind you, this is like the pandemic. Like, there's no way that we're going to publish 2 to 3. And so she said, you know what, 1 to 2. Right? So they said 1 to 2. And I said, I don't know, like, and then somebody brought up, it's like, that's like a lot, like, difference. Like, it could be like 1 paper or 2 papers. But then what happens when you have a bad year? What happens when you have like somebody sick, or you're on like new parent initiative, or whatever happens in your life? Because life happens, because we're also human beings. And so we added a line of like, on average over 3 years. And I said, well, that's great. But then that means like I can either write 3 papers in 3 years or 6 papers. That's a lot different, right? And so, but it just took a lot of these, and yes, it will take some meetings. But again, I went through different styles, data, like she wanted data, and I said, these are the number of publications we used to publish before the School of Medicine expected us to do it, and here's what you expect us to do. We won't even have the research infrastructure to do this. Like, we don't have the staffing to help us go through the IRB and all of that stuff. And so I'm proud to say one of the very first initiatives that we did in our department, in my role, was to just write down in a piece of paper, we are expected to write 1 paper on average over the course of 3 years. There's no ambiguity there, right? It acknowledges that we expect you to finish 3 papers in 3 years. However you do that, you do the first year and then you don't finish, you don't write for the next 2 years, that's fine. But that's written. But the amount of stress that relieved from people who all of a sudden were like, wait, how do we do the IRB thing? Like, who do we contact? So much easier, because now it was a lot more easier for us to accomplish it. So when we talk about culture, I think sometimes just understanding that shared values.
I also think, and again, this is not a course on change management. There are courses on change management that exist out there. But I think you're often, and I think the wellness space and a lot of these initiatives suffer from this external perception of the folks who aren't necessarily invested in the work, that it is soft or fluffy or hard to define or like unmanageable, and so I think actually framing, so a lot of the chairs and department leads and whoever it is that you're tackling that has the financial resources or other resources, they will be familiar with things like McKinsey's model, the PDSA cycle, Kotter's change management plan. And so I think using an explicit framework when you're presenting your idea can actually be very helpful, because then you're aligning yourself using the same language that they're used to looking at for other initiatives that are outside of well-being, and it lends it an air of both legitimacy in that sense of currency, but also it's just a much easier framework for them to understand, because you're trying to bridge that communication between what you feel is important and you know is important, but you have to do it in a way that they can also understand what you're trying to get across.
Our point for sharing this slide is to just remind us that instead of thinking of the plan part of the PDCA, for instance, and we're going to go through Kotter next, we should at least, for each of those steps, think of the different stakeholders. So I would think of this as a very complicated, like I will simplify it as a stakeholder analysis. There's many other aspects of that plan that needs to be teased out a little bit more before you start doing things. And so here's Cotter's, and we're gonna really like build on this as an example because I don't want you to be squinting. So our goal here again is to put things together. I know I've been practicing this new thing with the slides, so that was like, yeah, thank you. So it's to combine Cotter and PDSA and the McKinsey 7. And so let's try this. So Cotter's 8 steps. The first one is you establish a sense of urgency. I love it when our chief wellness officer recently, I heard him say, or it's actually recorded, uncompensated work. And so I am leveraging the phrase uncompensated work for everything that's truly uncompensated work in our department. And so for instance, how many of you chart at home or after shifts? Uncompensated work. And so that's the initiative that we're trying to tackle right now. The solutions, there's so many solutions already that we've considered and failed. And also, by the way, in our work, it's okay. Again, we've acknowledged earlier it's okay to fail. But really, in design thinking, it's better to fail fast. So the idea of failing fast, fail often, allows me to then reconsider the next step. Because if I invest all my energy in this one particular solution and spend like 8 months or like an entire year on that and it doesn't work, that's just an entire year of me working on one thing, right? But me failing, and this is a very big reframe for me failing on a project, like, and people are upset, like, when I get people upset, that is good. That means they care. Because then I get to like talk to them, tell me more why this did not work. Because then maybe somewhere in there, if you truly understand the problem, the solution will just like bubble up.
Right. I mean, and the other thing too is your sense of urgency may not be everybody else's sense of urgency is the other thing. It may be blindingly obvious to you that, you know, there's a problem with burnout, or there's a problem with attrition, or there's a problem with disengagement, or you know, psychological safety in your department. That may not be obvious to other people in the department, and they have a totally different viewpoint on things. I think oftentimes as the wellness champions or leaders within your units, you are often the person with the ear to the ground that sort of hears the things that are coming up from the residents, the trainees, the faculty. A lot of those things don't reach the chair. A lot of those things don't reach the leadership of the department. And so again, if you go, it's like, you know, you go to your chair and you say, you know, we have this huge problem. They may just be like, what? What problem, right? Because they haven't necessarily heard that, and so I think
other bigger problems that they're dealing with.
Or other problems, right? And so I think this is important, and it's not an obvious thing, right? It's like, oh, burnout is really high. Yes, we know that, but just don't. I wouldn't necessarily take it for granted that sense of urgency that you feel is parallel to the other folks that you're going to be working with.
Any thoughts on how do you create a sense of urgency in your projects or initiative?
Well, I mean, some of it is, unfortunately, I think some of it unfortunately takes some time to actually do a little bit of data collection and study it and bring a call to arms. I mean, I know we did one a few years ago that showed that basically 25% of our physicians were cognitively impaired due to fatigue. So when you bring data like that to your chair, suddenly your chair is like, well, that's terrible. We need to fix that. And you're like, yeah. We need to fix that. We've needed to fix that for a long friggin' time. So, you know, now the question is, how do you actually begin to do that? But once you have real data that shows that change is needed, they suddenly become much more malleable.
I like that. Our specialty, emergency medicine, we have essentially the highest burnout, which means that there's just so many areas that we can tackle. It doesn't mean we have to tackle everything. And so for me, like, if somebody complains about something and I hear it a couple of times now, then I just like band those together. I read up about it more, right? For me, I have a book club every month. I pick a book related to that thing. That way it's a little bit more informed. We create some plan based on this conversation. So for instance, sleep-related impairments. I got into a car accident and I pride myself as an optimist to drive home and park somewhere, but like this one day, I don't know what happened, traffic, but I got into an accident. I was fine. And I was so nervous. And I was like, if this happened to me, and I keep on telling myself, like, I do a lot of these wellness stuff, like, how many of my colleagues have gone through this and never talked about it? And sure enough, we did. We talked about it, and people were like, oh yeah, I got this, and the micro sleep, and it's like, we need to explore this a little bit more. And that, for me, creates a sense of urgency, because it's not just one person's problem. Now I got like a couple of people raising their hands and like, oh yeah, I felt that too. This is the slide that I picked for us versus them. We have to figure out a way to communicate with our leaders. Oftentimes, especially when we work with people who are experiencing burnout, everything is really dark. And so the institution did this, or the system is flawed, or the system is broken. We can't fix things when we're constantly telling the system it's broken. And so we have to find alignment somewhere, because there is some nugget of like kindness in those C-suite people, or like the administrators, who's telling us to just work harder, right? And finding that alignment, I think, is very, very key. All right, so the next step is forming a powerful guiding coalition. How do you find your support? So I love this grid, the power interest grids. If the people are like very interested in it, so let's say Emily is very excited about like fatigue research, because that's her work, I'm just gonna keep you informed, like, hey, we're gonna do this thing, like I would really love for you to buy in. But and also, if they have like high power and they're very interested, then you work with them a lot closer. Hey, you can change the schedule, you're the scheduler, let's work together. But if you're like low interest and low power, you don't ignore them, but you keep their like opinions like around so that they can, for me, oftentimes when my like the initiatives that I'm working on fails, it's because I ignore this group. Because they're the silent group who's just kind of just like cruising by, and then you do something and then change is bad for them, right? Like we're so used, even if like the change is supposed to be good, but the act of changing is very scary for people. And so then I just find a way to then engage with them a little bit. And so for me, one way to do that is I host like monthly forum. And we have the problem of the month. And I actually don't call it problems, we call it dilemmas, because inherently I normalize that we won't have solutions for this, but let's explore it a little bit more. And maybe somebody's just gonna bring up something that would then be a catalyst for, oh, somebody mentioned that maybe we should pay for like a hotel. That was like one of the suggestions. Why don't we just pay for a hotel for like people who work overnights? And then I was like, I don't know, that's a lot of money. And we looked into it. We really did look at like a couple of hotels, because maybe we can partner with them. We have a call room that we actually had somebody clean it like every time somebody uses it. And so like, again, just figuring out different solutions. I will tell you, a lot of these, like if you just pour money, it'll get fixed. They're not. People get used to it. This is called the pixie dust solution, right? It really is. And so the key is to really work on something that impacts people beyond just like covering up the problem.
Another way of thinking about this is people can fall into one of three categories when you're considering change, and you probably know who these people are already. You'll have your supporters, right? So people you know, same mindset, you know they're already on board, you may have worked with them previously on other projects. You have your resistors, so again, the folks in your department who may be vocal or not vocal, but folks that you just know are going to be very difficult with any type of change that you're thinking of. And then you have a group of maybes, which fall into that monitor square over there. And it's interesting because I think when people are approaching change management, they often in their minds think, okay, I have to really target the resistors. I have to figure out like, how am I going to win them over? What strategy do I need to talk to them? And the reality is your biggest bang for your buck will be with the maybes. Yeah. The folks who are like, just kind of percolating along, haven't really formed an opinion yet, you will be far more successful if you actually focus your efforts on bringing the maybes over to your side, because in reality, the resistors, they're going to be like 10% hopefully or less of your group, even though they are very vocal. But if you get the majority behind your initiative, that's not going to matter very much. And so I think, like I said, people tend to get distracted by focusing on the resistors because they're very easy to identify. I'm seeing some nods. You already know who they are. You're never going to change their mind. Yeah. It is not worth the effort or the trouble. Like, focus on the group in the middle who you actually can have some influence and who may actually be amenable to whatever changes that you're proposing. Grammar is not my strong point.
It's a tongue twister. Some of my big fails in my role has been to ignore the maybes because I just assumed that they were a yes. And then when we were like really towards the it was approved by the chair and then it was approved, like it was just gonna go forward, all of a sudden they raised something and then my chair is like, whoa, nobody mentioned this. And I was like, how many more meetings do I need to do? And which is actually that. So going back to the 7S model, like the stakeholder analysis, you really have to understand like each of the different communication styles they'll have to do. So when I talk to my ClinOps team, it's a very different conversation than the residency program or my chair. And it's also helpful to create cadence, especially if you're in a position where you will be making a lot of changes in the department. So for me, that means that I have a meeting with my chair every month, and if that gets rescheduled because she's a very busy person, I tell the person that works with her schedule, like, that's great, when am I gonna make that up? Because I need to make that up this month. Like, I just look at that as a vital sign, like a vital thing for me to have.
Right, and you may not, I think be aware of your blind spots. Like, you may have been in your department for decades, great. But it's worth getting opinions from other folks as far as thinking about who falls into which of these categories, because you may not know, right? You may not necessarily know when it comes to the change that you're proposing. I mean, some of you may know this, but I recently transitioned to a new department, so I'm at the University of Vermont now, and in a leadership capacity, and literally I'm like, I don't know anybody. Like, I don't know anybody who's going to be on any of these initiatives. And so, but getting comfortable with asking your chair, asking folks external to your department, other leaders sort of within your group, like, hey, like, tell me about this. You know, and you can leave it kind of open-ended, but just kind of tell me about this person. And this is a good exercise in general, good information to have in general, even if you don't have a specific project in mind that you want to put forward. Just, again, getting a flavor of how people think, what's important to them, how they communicate, who's likely to sort of fall in a similar mindset of you as you have, and who's likely to maybe resist what you're proposing. Like, that's always good information to keep in the back of your head. And
sometimes you think they're resisting because of the initiative. They're resisting because it costs money and it's going to come out of our bonus, or it's going to take more time, or they are worried about some other initiative that conflicts with it. So just talk to that person, and then again, reminding them of the shared values can be very powerful. Ooh, creating a vision. Again, now that you kind of have your guiding coalition, people that support you, there's going to be the naysayers, there's going to be the maybes, right? But you have to have a clear vision. And so for me, it's like saying that many times over, many ways, to remind them, like, hey, right now we're working on uncompensated work. Do we all agree that we're working on compensated work? All right, so what are we gonna do? All right, so we're gonna focus on not charting at home. So we need you to help us. And in as much as you're gonna have a lot of energy and you create this sense of urgency for people, I'll share with you my experience with this one initiative. This is active right now, this is ongoing, this is my project for the year. People don't fill out the surveys because they're survey fatigued. And so what do? I literally told them, I'm like, I have 17 responses for this thing that we're gonna invest a ton of money. And so I would love to hear from you, because this is anonymous, because by the end of next week, if I don't hear from you, I will base our initiative on whatever the survey will get. And I literally said that. And it didn't bump it so high, but it bumped it enough that I can actually like tease out a little bit more nuances of why they think one initiative was not going to work and then the other. So yeah, so find ways to get people to buy in.
You'll notice we haven't actually gotten to the thing you want to do yet, right? This is all just
It's all the
prep
pre-work.
work. And in your vision also, think about sort of like, again, this goes back to the parallels with education, but like what's going to be your outcome for success? What are you actually hoping to achieve? Short term, long term, in perpetuity, right? So not just kind of vaguely where you want to get to, but also think about more concretely what those goals and those steps might be along the way.
It's helpful. So for me, my chair knows this because I pull up the mission vision statement for our department and I try to align whatever initiative that I do based on this. Because then I look to her to actually help me figure out like, how can we get this funded? Like, how else can we get like support from the institution versus just us kind of like fixing it amongst ourselves? And we got there, right? So now you created the vision, but you have to communicate this. And you communicate this as the bigger faculty development or faculty forum, departmental meeting. You communicate it with each of those different nodes. So the program director, you communicate it with the nursing staff. You communicate with every stakeholder that you think will have some sort of resistance. And then if you communicate it well, they're going to be the ones that will convince each other that this is important. So this uncompensated work that we're doing and doing charting at home is taking away our time to be with our family, to do that hobby that we're trying to develop, and all of those things. So reminding them of those values that they mentioned earlier on. So it's helpful to find that alignment. Communicating it.
There can be some finesse to this, depending on the internal politics of your department in terms of order of operations, who you tell first, who your stakeholders are. Again, it goes back to your list of your supporters, your resistors, your maybes. I think my current chair was the one who mentioned this, but he never goes into a meeting without knowing the outcome. Right, and so there is something to figuring out who your stakeholders are and how you're actually going to communicate that vision, because it's one thing to send out a blast email to EM all, right? It's another thing to do it at a faculty meeting. It's another thing to do it in the one-on-one with the chair. It's another thing to do it at an informal sort of like post-shift get-together. And so there's multiple ways that you can go about communicating it, and more than likely you'll need to use different modalities to make sure it gets to everybody. But there is a little bit of finesse that is involved. And again, if you feel like you don't necessarily have that cultural awareness in your department, it is worth asking ahead of time, because the way that people are going to receive this, particularly that group of maybes in the beginning, can really set you up for an easy change subsequently or a much harder change after that.
Any thoughts from the group? What have you seen when you're communicating your vision? Have you received a communication that you're like, this does not align? I did not sign off on this, and I don't know why we're doing this. I've sent those messages. And so now I try not to put anything in writing until it's very, very clear. And I have so many people in the department looking, so these are our objectives. I'm very clear. Like at the end of this initiative, this is what we want to accomplish, and we try to make it succinct. And I have the chair look at it. I have like our finance person look at it, like to make sure that it passes like the different stakeholders. And it's really like when you start seeing it in an email, it's really been formed by a collective group instead of just me. Again, that note there, the different notes are there for Mackenzie to remind you, like this is not just your idea. This is now. Everybody is working on this in order for it to be successful. Or it may not be, but at least you got everybody. By the way, so I'll just go back. By getting people engaged to consider this one problem, that also gets you a lot of engagement. And again, I told you, when people get mad, like that's a win sometimes, because that's like they're passionate about this, and I can like work with you and understand like what are the pain points. But if they're apathetic about anything, then it's going to be very hard. So finding ways of engaging, including like how do you communicate this vision, is very important. Empower others to act on that vision.
Don't go it alone, right? I mean, I know functionally we oftentimes end up being sort of the one person tasked with it or drive, and sometimes it can I've suffered from this, but sometimes it can feel like you're literally the only person doing any work on your particular project. But as much as you can, try to empower other people, and again, it's like for those of us who are kind of type A and like things done a certain way, does not come naturally. But again, trying to empower other people, and they can be very junior people, right? And it is worth that investment. If somebody has an interest, a passing interest, maybe you see a future career for them in the space that you're working in, but really trying to figure out how you can spread some of that work, but also bring up the people around you.
Yeah. I love the idea of pebbles in people's shoes. And so people come up to you with their pebbles. The problem with that is that then you're carrying so many pebbles. Don't do that, right? It's their pebble. And also, like, you have to understand how that pebble is hurting them. And so my point here is that by empowering, I don't really like the word empowering. It's overused. I think it's really just adding curiosity to the problem. Like, what is it about this that's really driving you nuts? What is it about this pebble that makes it a pebble versus a boulder? Or maybe this is a rock that, like, these are gravity problems that we cannot solve here, right? But understanding, again, the withins and the beyonds will be very helpful. Ooh, that was totally me. That's okay.
Empowering others might mean one-on-one meetings. It might mean faculty development. It might mean things brought up at faculty meeting. Hopefully not any more online asynchronous modules. But again, empowering others could take multiple different forms.
Yeah. And even just listening to them can be very, very helpful. Ooh, this is probably one of the most important things that we can do, but we don't do. We have to celebrate little wins, right? It doesn't have to be like the big wins, like we were successful implementing this. We were successful in creating a vision. We were successful in having a meeting to talk about this. This is great because we've never had this meeting in our department ever before. So figuring out ways to make people know that you're doing something and there's forward movement as opposed to this big thing that like it's not doing anything for years, right? So for us, if it's scheduled, hey, we tried scribes, we tried this, and we tried moving the schedules around. It's not working. And so we're gonna keep on trying to do different things to figure out what's going to work in our department.
Right. I mean, we're emergency physicians. We're used to like chop, results. So like this can be very helpful, particularly if you're trying to tackle a huge long-term project like scheduling, creating a sabbatical program, like creating like housing for folks who are traveling long distances for night, whatever it is, right? Particularly the larger the project.
And this is when you empower those people. You give them credit. Oh, I really love it when Nicole did this. Hey, thank you for doing this project, like this part. It allowed us to move forward with this initiative. Then they get more engaged. This is not an LA or Arlene project. This is our project. But when we're celebrating wins, I point to different people in the department because then they feel that they can give more suggestions. And then consolidate improvements and produce still more change. So again, that PDCA or PDSA, you're continuously going to change this, right? Improve it, like iterate it a little bit. But you got to learn from those different projects that you've tried. There's also the idea of false fail. It may fail today because I led it or because it's just not the right time to do it because of other initiatives. But I put it in the back pocket because in maybe next month or 2 months from now, somebody else is going to complain about like, wow, I'm really like experiencing like sleep-related impairment or whatever. And then you tackle that project again. This is where we solidify things. So whatever is working, you celebrate it again. Hey, I'm so glad this pilot is over. We are now going to continue this. We're going to continue monitoring it. But for now, it sounds like the data that we have is that we're going to implement scribes. And I know that's going to cost us money, but in all the things that we've considered, that's going to be the one thing that will help us minimize that uncompensated work that you do at home.
One of the things that I think would be really interesting, and I'm seeing some nods as we're going through this cycle, if anyone feels that they have an example that they'd be willing to share of an initiative that they have either tried and made it partially through this cycle or not through this cycle, or one that they're considering, right, and that you'd like us to work through actually as a group.
The collective brilliance in this room is really amazing. I'm not just saying that. Like, I know many of you, actually, and it's really goosebumps. I love it, yeah.
It has to do with the sepsis committee, which I do sit on. Just I keep hearing this, and I just want to laugh every time. It's okay. Right now, I'm justifying it because I'm doing projects with my residents that have to do with it. So one of them is we're doing this new sepsis alert and getting people to do it because the nurses they don't believe in it, type of thing. And so it's,
by the way.
I mean, I have also done this at other institutions too and failed, I don't know how many times at trying to do a sepsis alert and get us more on point with doing all the policies that we have to do that are not completely research-based, but whatever. Anyway, so I was just taking notes while I was listening to this, and I was like, we definitely could do a much better job of giving the data back to our group as to how many sepsis alerts we have done and pointing out and giving recognition to people who are utilizing that and our nursing staff as well. And we do have like a data pause coming up to look at the ones, but we just sent out an email saying, hey, in order to figure out like if this is going to work or not, we actually have to do it. But I think that tying in that recognition on a personal level too, because we are a smaller institution, could actually be very impactful. It's been utilized for some other projects that I was like cataloging in my head that have worked in competitions and such. So
we often focus on the failures of like the missed work, and we don't celebrate the ones who are actually doing it consistently. So if you have data that like, let's say Emily is the one that like every single patient with sepsis, they are able to provide like all the right things, then you highlight her and then like, hey, this team, and not just her, the team. Right, because it's more than just one person. So for us, we call it A&A, so the amazing and awesome. So for every save of the months, we dedicate a time during conference every month for that person, that whoever receives the Save of the Month award, to then discuss the case and highlight every single member in the team that led to that save. Because then people are happy, like they're like, wow, I'm getting recognized for the work that we do, as opposed to it's just that one, it's always that one person.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, what did the communication look like when you, is this a pilot that you're doing?
Yes.
What did the communication rollout for it look like, given the numerous stakeholders involved?
Probably
yes. Not awesome. The physician side, which we had more control over, went fine. But what happened is the nursing side was told to just do it without any education. They were like, oh, we're starting to do this and this is the expectation. They were like, what? I was like, you guys didn't get your education on this yet? They're like, we have no idea what you're talking about. So
therein lies that important point also, right? Like, I don't know how it is at your shop, but at our shop, our nurses are under the hospital. I am on the faculty are under the School of Medicine. Our residents under the hospital. So different CEOs, different unions trying to like navigate one thing, and so they have different interpretation. I would probably suggest focusing on one thing. Is it the fluids that we're focusing on? Is it the antibiotics? Because you can't do all of the sepsis bundle, because that's a lot.
I get to do a lot of those case reviews too. We're working on it. There are opportunities, but the sepsis alert thing, which is real time, and we have this whole thing, it just hasn't gained the engagement and the buy-in from everybody that it needs to.
Why
so this gave me some
care,
good ideas.
Right? Like if I was one of your, why do I care? It's more work
So
for
we
me.
presented this at least to the physician group in terms of our current data and how maybe we're missing opportunities and our data is not so great. Or like mortality. Our mortality. Our mortality data and like how many of these cases were falling out. But what?
I like inviting the
like
patients
specific?
to come in.
No, but that's an It's a good idea. Any of the what education? Nursing education, no.
So in our hospitals, in New South Wales and Australia, sepsis all can be
steamroller that came out about 12, 15 years ago. The sepsis steamroller that came about 12, 15 years ago, which I think was initiated worldwide, that came through the state of New South Wales. So the sepsis bundles came, that's 10, 12 years ago now, and we've got an alert and all that sort of stuff. But when it first came out, there was a package of care that came in terms of education. So there was, some patient stories everyone had to watch. All of the nurses had to do it as part of their education and all of the doctors. And then when we rolled out the sepsis bundle, then we had to deliver the nursing education as in the same doctors working in the floor. And then we had a couple of nurse sort of champions who were there, a couple of doctor champions, and then there was an alert on our EMR and all that sort of stuff. And then we had to measure, time to antibiotics, time to second bag of fluid. We've got a gas machine on the ED so that people could do gases. And now basically what happens is it's just like normal practice, basically. So you come in, the nurse goes, I've got a sepsis, I've started all of this, can you do this? And you're like, oh, okay, no problems at all. Because everyone knows it kind of makes it easier. Because otherwise, the other end of that was, before all this came out, there'd be the sort of the person who's tachycardic and febrile, and the nurse is going, can you come and see this patient? Can you come and see this patient? Can you come and see this patient? And they didn't do so well. So those stories really help. And so in New South Wales, there's 2 or 3 videos I remember that I watched. One was a person in their early 20s who got staph sepsis from a cut or something, in ICU for 2 or 3 weeks, dialyzed the whole bit, and then telling the story. But because it was a younger person, it was like, geez, that could have been me. I'm a worker. That looks like the person my age.
Yeah. Our sepsis champion at the county was one of the physicians who shared her story when she had sepsis, and because of the team, she's still there working. And so making it a little bit more personal is helpful. I also want to just acknowledge that, how is this wellness again? Right? And so there is a scope creep that happens because we try to solve so many things, and then it takes away from uncompensated hours that we were supposed to focus on. And so for me, I call that out because we are so good with trying to solve problems, and yet then we get so spread thinly because you're bringing up all of these, what was the thing that your master's program told you?
You never want to be the unwanted solution to an unperceived problem.
Right. Like sepsis, that's a big thing. That's that cleanups people. Right?
And so now, just coming back to your thing when you said the nurses didn't buy in, so now the nurses, in fact, did a survey, one of the lead nurses did a survey of all of the staff, including the doctors and everyone, basically to say, what are the impediments to doing it? So because they're getting frustrated that they can't get buy-in from the doctors now, and it was kind of the other way around. So
if it's an email, I'll make this relevant. Again, I'm trying to create a sense of urgency for your work here. If I get a lot of emails about how I'm failing the sepsis bundle, right? I would probably focus on failing. So for me, it's the chart completion. They call it delinquents. You have chart delinquency. And I remember this, we don't call it chart delinquency anymore because I wrote them an email. I was like, do you know how frustrating and hurtful it is to be called delinquent after I just did the clinical shifts that I did? And I just went home because I'm tired. And it's because our system for charting is just not great, right? So please be a little kinder when you send me this email. I actually didn't say that. I had coaching then. So I said, I wonder if there's another way for us to refer to this email so that it doesn't trigger physicians who are already tired. And so when they wake up and they get this email from you and you call them delinquent, it hurts even more. And so now it's called something else, but not delinquent. Patrick.
So I always like when they threaten to suspend you, and I'm like, don't threaten me with a good time.
So I'm actually just going to read somebody else's email that came to us today, to my department, because actually our medical director has done a really fantastic job of working on the language that he communicates ideas with. And he said, I'll summarize it, it's a long email. As well as analysing clinical and operational outcomes over the past year, and especially the last 2 months, we'll need your feedback and grace over the next few weeks as we learn from these updates with the blah, blah, blah. But it's just, it's such a welcoming, it welcomes feedback. It's just really powerful.
Simple things like changing names can be very powerful.
So just talking about the sepsis thing, yeah, I guess we all have, we've all done this in our shops at some point.
Created a sense of urgency already. I love it.
So I did it in 2 institutions. So I just wanted to call attention to the number 5, empower others to act on the vision. So when we finally launched it, I was probably called a zealot. I had the solution that nobody wanted, that nobody perceived as a real problem. That's a perfect quote. And so here's the thing, it was working. And so people saw it, but they weren't quite engaged. So the empower others to act on your vision piece, such a powerful thing. Because what I did next is I went out to the paramedics and I just provided a little education. They were so engaged because they see these septic patients all the time coming from nursing homes. Provided them with training, gave them the sepsis alert. They alerted it. They started giving the fluids before they showed up in the hospital. And then what could you do when you show up with a septic patient in the hospital with a paramedic that says, this is a septic patient? Immediately people got their antibiotics, and that improved our numbers by an additional like 25 to 30% within the first year. But that's so powerful, and I'd forgotten that is a really good way of thinking about change management. Think outside of the box. Think about who your other stakeholders might be that you weren't even thinking about for executing a plan.
And following that up, you can create small wins with like, hey, let's engage the community. The community is now involved with the care of sepsis instead of just you, the nurses, and the doctors in this emergency department. EMS is now involved. Highlight that in your website. Like, we are partnering with our EMS, like pre-hospital care. And then the rest of the hospital gets wind of this, and then they're gonna hopefully support you more. But I love how like one thing led to another, and then kind of calling that out every time it happens.
This makes it seem very easy. I think for all of us who have done this work, it is not easy. But I like the way that this is, and it's like a lot, it's like, part of, when I first started learning about this stuff, it's like so much work on the front end. You're just like, I just want to do this thing. I just want to get started. Like, we need it. And it really takes a little bit of discipline to do the legwork up front, but it just makes it so much easier once you get going. You have a team, you have people on your side, you have the resources, and it just makes your project that much more likely to succeed.
Yeah. We underestimate also the emotional impact of this to us as human beings, right? And so again, even simple things like changing the names can be powerful. So who has peer review in your department? Everybody, because that's like by law. Do you call it peer review? Case review. We call it case review also. It's not about the peer. That peer is already beating themselves up, right? And so we call it case review because then we can look at it together, including that peer, right? And learn from it. And so for us, the same thing with like sick call. We don't call it sick call anymore. We just call it backup call because the pandemic has taught us that there's many reasons why people should be activating the backup system. And so it destigmatizes that like, well, I'm not sick, but I really am not feeling well, and there's no way I can like work tonight. And so then you use that, and then track that, and figure out a way to then address that problem head on. This slide is just really to highlights that what we did here in this session was to incorporate the different aspects of different change management models, and you can't do it alone. You have to work with other people, and you also want to make sure that you acknowledge the people that you're working with in whatever contributions they provide, even if they're the naysayers. I think this is that.
Yeah. And so that is our workshop. And we really hope that you got something out of it, something that you can take home to your learners, something you can take home to your faculty, something you can take home to your institutions, and most importantly, something that you can take home for yourselves. If there are any questions, we'd love to hear from you because we got done early, because who gets mad when you get done early? Nobody.
Thank you, everybody. Again, shameless plug, Wellness Committee meeting, 8 in the morning. I know, 8 in the morning, very wellness. And there's a wellness consultation, so if you're interested, we can actually send a team to your department to explore what are ways so we can improve the well-being of your colleagues. So yeah, 2 things to also take away.
So if there are no questions, I do just want to give a shout out to my colleagues here because I submitted this and put their names on did everything. And then I was like, oh, by the way, I submitted an SAEM workshop and your names are on it. These three have really been kind of my professional ride or dies. And then it turned into a really great personal relationship. So I thank you for allowing me to, just have some champagne one night and decide independently that I'm going to put in a workshop at SAEM, and you joined.
I think what I learned here is that you surround yourself with people that will submit things for you, and also know your strengths and weaknesses so that you can just show up as yourself. Full disclosure, we actually do this for each of the conferences, so we submit for each other so that we can be more efficient with our time.
And thank you guys for coming.
Yeah, truly.
Thank you so much.
You had so many other options, including
wilderness.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to be here, so.
Wait, I want to put up the first slide of this picture of all